In this world, everyone has at least one ability, and this guy Kim has a special one of his own. He picks up a turtle and stares right at it. Then he immediately bites down on its head, chewing with a crunching sound. He can do this because no matter what Kim eats, his body never feels any discomfort or internal turmoil. Kim has tried so many things to make the best use of this bizarre ability, and in the end, he finally succeeded with this freakish power. He became a poacher in Africa. Just then, someone walks in and calls out to Kim saying that General Lighting wants to catch a gorilla. This guy is Hispanic Kim's poaching accomplice. He's the one responsible for coordinating with the warlord General Lighting. Kim keeps cleaning his gun, just glancing over and asking, "The whole body?" Hearing that, Hispanic raises his hand to point at his own head and replies, "No, he only needs the head and the hands." Kim loads a bullet into his gun and continues to ask how many. Hispanic replies, 2 or maybe more. Kim starts thinking to himself. In short, General Lighting wants decorative items made from the heads and ashtrays made from the hands of the gorillas. He'll have to kill at least 2 of them to get the heads without needing their bodies. After thinking it over, Kim sets his gun upright and says, "That works. We head out tomorrow." Hispanic smirks upon hearing that, not saying anything else. He then turns around and leaves. Before heading out, he doesn't forget to give him a salute. Cut to the scene early in the morning in the African jungle. Kim and Hispanic are carefully making their way inside. Kim is holding his hunting rifle, thinking to himself that there are some troubles with hunting gorillas, mainly that besides him, many others are targeting them too. Aside from illegal poachers looking to sell for a profit, there are also anti-poaching armed forces. They are different from those amateur poachers because they are fully armed and equipped to the teeth. If you run into them, the best thing to do is just run. As Kim is walking, he glances over at Hispanic, who is carefully leading the way, and notices his behavior. He thinks to himself, he seems a bit strange today. Is he really leading us the right way? Kim immediately speaks up. Is this the... Before he can finish, Hispanic shouts, "Yes, we are going the right way." Kim hears that. He immediately realizes something and asks, "You speak Korean?" Hispanic then pulls a pair of handcuffs out of his pocket and says, "That's right. I've been tracking your case for 15 years. He smirks, looking at Kim with unfriendly eyes, and continues, "Not just Korean, but also English, Japanese, Chinese. Everywhere you've been. I've learned the language of that place." As Hispanic speaks, his hands tremble. The next second, Kim is locked in handcuffs. Hispanic loudly declares, "You are now under arrest for murder, poaching, smuggling, fraud, participating in criminal organizations, and drug trafficking. Damn, that's a lot of crimes. Regardless, you are under arrest for the aforementioned charges." Cut to the edge of the forest where a police car is parked. Kim has been escorted into the car, flanked by 2 agents holding guns. One of them shouts, "Finally caught you, you dog." Kim sits across from Hispanic. He speaks up. "So General Lighting is a fake. You planned all of this." Hispanic doesn't deny it and replies, "That's right. It was all planned from the start." Hispanic tells Kim the whole process. "It took me 3 months just to get close to you, and another 3 months to earn your trust. I thought I'd have to play this role until the day I died. If this case were made into a movie, this 6-month performance of mine would deserve an Oscar." Just as Hispanic is feeling smug, a phone call comes in. His expression changes instantly, and he speaks to the person on the other end. "What? What the hell are you talking about? There are 2 moons." While he's still on the phone, the car suddenly shakes. Hispanic shouts, "What is this? Why is the car acting up?" Kim, meanwhile, is still sitting calmly in his seat. The reason he became a poacher is because suddenly terrifying red veins appear on his face. He has the ability to eat anything without getting a stomachache, and the power to transform using the traits of the things he has consumed. Kim opens his mouth and his teeth have changed. They have become shark teeth. Sharp scales also tear through his clothes. Kim's whole body shakes. Those are pangolin scales. He is the internationally wanted criminal, Mr. Kim. Hispanic sees Kim's form and turns pale. He breaks into a cold sweat out of fear, thinking about how Kim is a criminal born in South Korea. He has been involved in every crime imaginable to make money, such as murder, smuggling, fraud, drug trafficking, and many others. He is infamous for using the money he earns to buy animals, rare animals from all over the world, and eating them. Seeing Kim's arm transforming, the fingernails also becoming sharp. Hispanic continues to think that is why he is known by the nickname the Beast Merchant. An agent sitting next to him sees Kim's transformation and cowers to the side, looking terrified, unable to utter a single word. Another sees Kim's body growing larger and shouts, "What the hell are you doing?" The other agent speaks up too. "Stop right there, stand still, or I'll shoot. Stop right now, or else." Before he can finish, the agent on the other side fires his weapon, shouting, "Fire!" Kim raises his arm with its sharp claws. Blood immediately splatters inside the car. Hispanic, seeing this, thinks, no one knows why he can do that. The reason is he eats countless types of animals. Looking at Kim, who has completely turned into a monster before his eyes. Hispanic is still thinking about how he became a poacher just to hunt and eat animals. Everything at this moment had become crystal clear. Kim looked at Hispanic with eyes burning red with rage and spoke. "Any last words?" Hispanic was so terrified by now that he could only let out a single curse. The next second, a piercing scream rang out. The driver in the front seat, separated by a partition, had no idea what was going on. He glanced at the wire mesh screen, heard the shout, and turned to ask, "What's wrong?" But before V could finish his sentence, a massive hand punched through the barrier. The car lost control, crashed into a tree in the forest, and black smoke began to pour from the wreckage. A foot stepped out of the car. It was Kim. He had returned to his human form, pushed open the back door, and stepped out. Kim looked up, and the sight before him made him freeze. He gasped, "What in the world is this?" There were 2 moons. In the sky hung 2 moons, one large and one small appearing together. In Kim's reflection, he was still a monster with a pair of horns on his head. Kim looked at the pack of wolves circling him at that moment. He reached up to his neck, thinking to himself that he had drifted to a place that wasn't Earth. In the darkness, countless wolves with sharp eyes stood ready, led by one with 2 long, protruding fangs. This land where Kim had ended up? This place was crawling with creatures capable of using skills, so-called monsters. There were monsters that looked like Earth animals, buffaloes, vultures, even dragons. And then there was him. Kim, now standing in front of one of these beasts, closed the book in his hand, glared, and said, "All right, then, let's see what skills you've got." Then immediately after, Kim transformed into his monster form and lifted the creature before him to his mouth. Kim thought, "I will become the strongest entity in this place." Switching scenes back to earlier, Kim remembered Hispanic thinking about how he had been betrayed by his teammates and captured by international police. But what he saw after crawling out of the prison transport vehicle was a sky with 2 moons. Kim stood there watching for a long time before concluding that this was not Earth. With his clothes torn in many places, Kim rubbed his chin, pondering for a moment, and wondered if this might actually be for the better. Like Hispanic said, he had committed countless crimes, which was why he was being hunted by the UN, police, and similar organizations. Just then, there was a noise behind him. Kim glanced back and muttered, "I guess I won't be hunted anymore now." Kim looked over and immediately spotted the wild beasts. He muttered, "Damn it, it's those wolves." He stared at them and continued, "I thought wild animals had the instinct to know when to avoid a fight with a tough opponent. Seems like that's not the case." Veins bulged from Kim's neck to his face. He looked on with sharp eyes and said, "You must be the leader, right? A wolf with an X-shaped scar in the middle of its face." It stared at Kim, drool dripping endlessly. The alpha wolf let out a roar, and immediately the pack charged. Kim's teeth clamped shut. His jaw slowly shifted into a set of razor-sharp fangs, and his entire body transformed. His head became that of a tiger, his torso like a chimpanzee. As the pack rushed toward him, seeing that form, their feet suddenly faltered. Immediately the wolves scattered in different directions out of fear. The alpha wolf also came to a halt. Kim didn't give it a chance to run. He moved behind it in a flash and used his massive hand to lift the wolf up. Its mouth wouldn't stop yelping. As soon as Kim dropped the wolf back to the ground, one of its fangs had snapped off and blood soaked a large area. The rest of the pack, witnessing this, cowered in fear. Kim stood under the 2 moons, holding the carcass of a wolf in his hand. The pack fled in all directions. The alpha's body was held in Kim's grasp. Blood continued to drip from its mouth. Kim spoke, "It's been a long time since I've had a meal. You'll be my first bite in this strange place." Kim finished speaking and opened his mouth to bite into the wolf, but immediately had to spit it out. Kim thought to himself that he was using a tiger's jaw, yet he still couldn't tear through its hide, if that's the case. Thinking this, Kim immediately shifted into the form of a hippopotamus. A moment later, Kim had finished eating the wolf. Only the skeleton remained on the ground. He wiped his mouth, thinking, "That's strange. Just to skin a single wolf?" but I had to use both a hippo's jaw and shark teeth to struggle through it. Kim concluded that this wasn't ordinary skin. Plus, why were they so terrified of his roar? Science had proven that roars make muscles vibrate and cause paralysis, but when he let out that sound, the whole pack immediately froze. If they were large predators like wolves, they should have just been startled. At least that was according to the knowledge he had. Kim finished thinking and suddenly realized something. He wondered internally. Knowledge, huh? Kim looked up at the two moons in the sky and started thinking, could it be that this is a world where all my knowledge is useless? Not quite. Back to the scene, Kim was chewing on the last piece of meat. As soon as he finished, he casually tossed the bone aside. Kim was sitting in a cave. Deep inside, piles of animal bones were stacked up. A week had passed since his first meal here. During that time, he had hunted and consumed many species of animals in this forest. A bear with unusually large forearms, a snake not sure if it was poisonous or not, a deer with antlers as sharp as knives. Aside from a few odd points, they were no different from creatures on Earth. Kim stood up slowly, stepped out of the cave, and walked through the bushes. Kim pushed the branches aside and took a look. Kim couldn't help but wonder if there was some kind of advanced technology or system at work here. It was nothing like what he knew on Earth. His arm began to shift as he tried to figure out what it was. He was out hunting again when he spotted an arm resting on a bush. A man was searching for something inside the forest. Kim was currently in the form of a beast, and from a distance he immediately recognized the man as a human. He narrowed his eyes, thinking that humans actually existed here too. He might be able to gather some information. Kim immediately reached out and placed a hand on the man's shoulder, silently thinking, "Hey." The man glanced back in an instant, the ability to mimic body parts. The bodies of the creatures he consumed didn't grant him godlike powers. In fact, there were many limitations. The condition for transforming his body was, they had to be the same type of body part. He could turn his hand into a bear's claw, but he couldn't turn it into a crocodile's jaw. And he couldn't use parts from creatures like lobsters or centipedes because their body structures were completely different from a human's. Finally, he couldn't overlap different body parts. Because he currently had the head of an eagle, he couldn't speak human language. Kim let out a cry at the man who had just turned around. The man's face went pale with terror, and he immediately turned and ran. He shouted something in a language Kim didn't understand. Before he could get far, the man collided with the antlers of a running deer and fell to the ground. Blood soaked into the ground. The deer just calmly ran off. Kim approached where the man was lying. The man glanced at him, then continued to say something in a language Kim couldn't understand, so he just stood there watching. Naturally, they used a different language than he did. After speaking, the man immediately stopped breathing. Unfortunately, he couldn't save him, and he had no reason to do so anyway. It was true he needed information about this world, but even if he revived him now, they wouldn't be able to communicate. Besides, it was much easier to gather information after the man was dead. Kim immediately shifted back into his monster form with sharp, jagged teeth. With his abilities, he could consume the brain and read the memories. Kim then ate the man's brain. He had acquired the language of this world, thanks to the man's cooperation. Right after eating the man's brain, Kim took his clothes and put them on. The best trophy, however, was the monster illustration book that the man had been carrying. Kim opened a page. It contained details about a monster called a Kim Kang Lang with an average height of 200 centimeters, an average weight of 120 kilograms, and the skills Bite and Roar. Thanks to that book, Kim now knew what kind of monsters were here, and how this world operated according to a system. Thanks to this system, he could achieve the goals he couldn't complete on Earth. 2 months later, a monster with a head similar to a hippo, but with teeth, extremely sharp and 2 long pointed fangs protruding from its lower jaw. While observing the monster's head, Kim muttered to himself, wondering, is this Joe's regeneration ability? Kim had placed the head on a rock and the body in a wooden barrel. Kim turned his back on Joe's head and spoke up. It can regenerate its brain after a month, even after being torn into many pieces. This information wasn't in the book. I didn't expect it to be capable of that. Kim was holding the book in one hand while his other hand shifted into a different limb. He reached out to touch the monster to examine it, and then Kim was suddenly surprised. He jerked his transformed hand back. Blood from the monster's body splattered onto Joe's face. The head suddenly let out a loud cry. Kim heard it immediately. He smirked and said, "Oh, you're awake. That's great." Kim was still standing in the monster's purple blood. He continued, I still haven't found your skin's limit. How much burning does it take to peel it off? And at what level will you get burned? Are you resistant to acid toxins? And how many times can you regenerate? There are still so many experiments to perform. Kim had asked it countless questions. He turned to look at Joe's head closed, the book glared and said, Now how should I experiment on you? Scene shift. The north of the great tree forest, the Oryx tribe. A tall man with red skin and 2 protruding fangs sat on a throne and asked, You say you're a warrior. The man replied immediately, The goddess gave me a mission. In the great tree forest a monster will be born. It will devour everything in its path, to absorb skills and use them skillfully. A terrifying monster. Scene shift, the great tree forest. Joe's territory. A Joe tribe member was carrying a homemade hammer made from a large wooden club tied to a rock on its shoulder. Following behind was another Joe. The 2 monsters spotted footprints on the ground. The one in front looked down at the footprints and said, Human tracks, those guys are hunting. Immediately after, it opened its mouth, let its long tongue out to lick the air, and continued, I wonder where they went. It slammed the hammer into the ground, cracking it, and said angrily, How dare they eat the delicious human meat all by themselves? This monster had black spots on its skin. It glanced at the 2 behind it and shouted, Find them before they eat it all and leave only bones. The one behind it broke into a cold sweat seeing it so angry. Stuttering and bowing, the 2 trolls quickly scrambled away after blurting out, Yes, yes, boss. One of them pointed the way, yelling, This way. The scene shifts to Kim currently in his monster form. He's holding a troll's head ready to eat it when he suddenly senses something. He glances over with sharp, cold eyes. Still in his wolf-headed form, he drops the troll's head and mutters, I was just about to go out hunting for more test subjects. And here you are delivering yourselves right to my doorstep. Outside the cave where Kim was hiding, the 3 trolls had just arrived. The troll leader flared his nostrils, sniffing the air. The veins on his face bulged as he growled, I smell human meat inside this cave. One of his lackeys followed behind, sweating profusely. Boss! Something feels wrong. The leader scoffed coldly. It's probably just those bastards playing games, trying to hog all the human meat for themselves. Just then another scent wafted past the leader's nose. He sniffed again and said, Wait, this is the smell of troll blood. The very next second, the sight before him made him freeze in his tracks. His eyes widened, and sweat broke out across his face. Standing before them was Kim, massive and monstrous. The 2 lackeys panicked, shouting, Boss, watch out! The leader, seeing Kim, was instantly terrified. He swung his hammer, but before it could even connect, Kim slammed his fist into him. Blood splattered everywhere, and a thought flashed through Kim's mind. Troll muscle combined with the sheer power of bear claws. Kim glared with fury, thinking, This combo isn't half bad. His punch had completely pulverized the leader's head. Kim sighed. Oh man, I was supposed to keep him as a test subject, but I accidentally killed him. Watching the scene, the 2 remaining trolls stammered, barely able to choke out the word, boss. They looked at Kim with primal fear, screaming, You monster! And charged at him with their wooden clubs. As one shouted, Die! Kim snapped the wooden club in his hand like a twig. In one swift motion, Kim sliced off the troll's arm. The creature stared at its severed limb, gasping, What the? Kim immediately opened his jaws, revealing 2 sharp, lethal fangs, and bit straight into the monster's arm. Kim's thought process, the venomous fangs of a viper. The best way to neutralize the troll's regenerative abilities is to paralyze them. 2 puncture marks remained on the troll's body. The troll went stiff, stuttering, I can't move. I can't move my body. With that, the troll collapsed to the ground. The last one left saw this and began to tremble in pure terror. Cold sweat poured down his forehead as his eyes darted around assessing the situation. He saw Kim still in his monstrous form while his fellow troll lay in a pool of blood, weakly reaching out toward him, whispering, Run! Run away! Seeing that the troll trembled even harder, unable to speak, Kim advanced. Half of his face was a wolf's, the other half had taken on the features of a troll. He bared his sharp teeth and snarled, You should probably go join your friends, don't you think? The only things that followed were the troll's blood-curdling screams, then the sound of blood splattering. Over the next few months, Kim conducted many experiments to gather data for his book. By now, he was even able to shift his entire head into that of a troll. The cave was filled with screams of terror. "Help me! Please don't kill me!" There was a new concept in the book he'd found, skills. At first, Kim thought it was just a guide for some kind of game, because skills were usually things you only saw in video games. However, the creatures he had eaten here possessed abilities that worked just like skills. Thanks to his experiments, Kim reached a conclusion. Yes, skills were real. He had learned a few key things from the results. One, skills had no effect on creatures that didn't have them. For example, the viper species here used venomous skills to paralyze their prey. Kim had tested this by letting the snakes bite his arm. He only ended up with scars from the bites. He never got poisoned. 2 physical attacks that didn't use skills were still effective against opponents who did have skills. After testing on one hand, a large bear with venomous skills and normal fangs, both the poison and paralysis worked on the bear. He had experimented with 2 different snakes as well. After all the testing, Kim finally understood the reason why. The Kang Lang pack, despite their ability to resist status effects, were still terrified of his roar. It was likely because it was the roar of a tiger, a creature that didn't come from this world. In other words, because he was from Earth, he was immune to their skills, but his attacks were still effective against them. After reaching this conclusion, Kim smirked, thinking that because of this, he could become the apex predator of this world's food chain. On Earth, humanity ruled. No matter what creature you consumed, you couldn't defeat mankind because of modern technology and weaponry. It exceeded the limits of all other life forms. But here it was different. Humans in this world were just prey to countless powerful monsters. Atomic bombs and overpowering technology simply didn't exist here. When Kim was a kid watching TV, he had seen images of a massive T-Rex. Since he was a child, Kim had dreamed of becoming an apex predator, and to achieve that dream, he just had to eat the creatures here. His mind raced, thinking of the troll tribe with their infinite regeneration, the ogres with their unparalleled strength, and a monster that breathed fire hot enough to melt steel. A dragon. The scene shifts to a dragon flying in the sky with a vast forest stretching out below. On the ground, something round caught his eye. Seeing the dragon fly over it, chirped, "What is that, a dragon?" Looking up at the dragon in the sky, the thing on the ground, it couldn't help but cheer. This really is a world like I've seen in fantasy anime, a slime. He was incredibly excited, saying, "I never expected to be reincarnated as a slime. I can eat anything," he thought to himself. The person couldn't help but chuckle, muttering to himself, "I was born to be the strongest. This is clearly destiny." Slim, meanwhile, grew curious and started wondering, "I wonder if this thing actually works." Right after that, Slim immediately opened his status window and said, "Status skill open." The status frame instantly displayed level 1 stamina, 1 strength, 1 speed, 1 wisdom ability to consume anything using your soul and make it your own. Slim read it, then looked surprised and cheered. It's exactly like in an anime, Just then a snake slithered through the grass on the road, instantly grabbing Slim's attention. The snake crawling along seemed to have noticed something too. Looking back at what was in front of it, Slim had already grown massive. In the next moment, he devoured the snake right in front of him and loudly declared, "Tastes like a snake." Shortly after, Slim absorbed it. His system immediately displayed, "You have consumed a snake. Your speed has increased by 1. You can now use the skill Paralytic Poison. Your soul has decreased due to consumption." Seeing the status display like that, Slim was momentarily bewildered and asked, "Soul decreased?" But he immediately brushed off the worry and said, "Whatever. I'm sure later on I'll find a way to get my soul back. Here I am, the main character. I am Win." After saying that, Win swallowed all the beasts around him. After eating and spitting out the bones, Win moved along the road, muttering to himself, "The reason I was discriminated against and had to live a miserable life was because I got stuck with useless parents. It's all their fault. A slime with the potential to rival a monster, and eventually I will become a monster. I will gradually use up all my soul, to become stronger only to eventually destroy myself. The goddess of Good didn't choose me to be a hero, she chose me as a disposable tool." Scene shift. Narration of Warrior Can 6. The land of Good lies under the protection of the goddess and the warrior chosen by the goddess who follows the warrior's code to protect humanity. The more humanity suffers, the more danger they are in, the stronger the warrior chosen by the goddess becomes. But even that warrior, even you the hero could not stop the destruction caused by that monster. Ken recalled his memories of having to face a gigantic monster. A monster that brought a disaster upon the entire world with its terrifying power. Because of it, Ken had met a horrific death. But when Ken woke up once more, he was young again. Ken had returned to the past, back to his self from 15 years ago. This was the final chance the goddess had given him. He had to stop that monster. Back to the present, Ken frowned and spoke up. The goddess prophesied it like that. As soon as he finished his sentence, a pain surged in his chest. Ken immediately clutched his chest, the pain making him wince. In his mind, Ken wondered, is it because I lied? This is punishment for breaking the warrior's code. But if he said he came from the future, the man with red skin in front of him wouldn't believe it. The elder of the Onyx Burnus tribe spoke up. Prophecy, you say? Could you explain more about this prophecy? Ken heard this and replied, of course, elder, right after that. Ken told him everything he knew about this great tree forest. A monster that eats and absorbs skills will appear. I have come to prevent it from causing future disaster. Hearing this, Bernice, who was sitting on the chair, also spoke. If the prophecy you speak of is true, then this is a serious matter. Hearing that, Ken skeptically asked, a serious matter? Bernice closed his eyes, rubbed his chin, and said, actually, I haven't encountered any Cho for the past 2 months. Maybe the monster has targeted the Cho's regeneration ability. Hearing Bernice say this, his gaze instantly changed, becoming more serious. Regeneration and powerful destruction are the Cho's 2 special skills. Ken heard this, frowned, and urgently spoke. In other words, if we track the Cho's trail now, we might be able to find that monster's lair. Saying that, Ken clenched his hand into a fist. He was shaking with anger and said, this time, I won't let you run wild. Scene shift. Kim is still flipping through a book. After reading a fair bit, he spoke up, looks like this much is enough. Kim then closed the book in his hand. He glanced behind him and muttered, they all died during the experiment. Kim was in a cave. A small fire had been lit, and around it were the carcasses of monsters. Kim then said, only one is left to Cho. Its head is still being kept by Kim. It was trembling without any strength, but still pleaded, please just kill me. Hearing it say that, Kim lit a torch and said, all right then. He looked at the growing fire and continued, I will send you off peacefully. Even though we've been together for a while now, I'm forced to find something new for my experiments. Kim brought the flame in front of the Cho and said, I will let you die according to your wish. As the Cho opened its eyes and saw the flame, it thought to itself, the moment has finally come. The next second, it closed its eyes, waiting for death. But after a while, feeling nothing, the Cho opened its eyes to look. Kim was holding the torch in one hand. His other hand was holding the book. He looked inside and said, wait a minute. Boiled Cho blood can be used as a restorative potion. That means I don't need to dispose of this one right now. Hearing his words, the Cho immediately shed tears and shouted. Kim slowly sat down and continued reading the book. The Cho saw this and called out to him, you jerk, hurry up and kill me. Kim was so absorbed in his book that he didn't notice what he was saying. The page he was reading described a species called the Great Forest Lizardmen, standing about 180 centimeters tall and weighing around 85 kilograms. Their skills include venom, spit underwater, breathing fast, swimming, and reduced physical damage. Lizardmen live independently in the forest. They are not monsters but a sentient species. However, they are extremely hostile toward outsiders and will capture or kill anyone who dares to trespass, just like the illustration above. After finishing the page, Kim began talking to himself. Lizardmen, huh? A hybrid between mammals and reptiles. After learning this, Kim wore a cunning grin and muttered, I wonder if they'll be of any use. Scene changed to the Great Forest Swamp area. A group of lizardmen armed with weapons were walking through the swamp when one of them suddenly sensed something. Before them stood a shadow with an obscured face. One of them spoke up, is that a troll? Another added, we haven't seen them around lately. Wonder where they've been hiding. No sooner had he finished speaking than one of them was attacked. Seeing this, the one beside him cursed, you filthy troll, how dare you set foot on our territory? But the scene before him made him break into a cold sweat. He stammered in fear, What is that? Before him stood Kim with a giant snake-like head wide open attached to a troll's body. Kim grabbed him by the throat, opening his maw to swallow the lizard man whole. Terrified, the lizard man stammered, Mon monster! Before the word even left his lips, Kim had gulped him down. The remaining lizard man, watching in horror, shouted, "What kind of freak are you, you monster?" Seeing Kim chewing on his comrade, the lizard man's disgust was quickly overshadowed by sheer terror. He didn't know what this thing was, but if he let it live, his entire species would be in danger. He thrust his spear at Kim and roared, "Die!" A large hole immediately appeared on Kim's shoulder, but the very next moment the wound regenerated instantly. Seeing that, the lizard man couldn't believe his eyes and gasped, "Regeneration? How is that even possible?" Only trolls are supposed to have that skill. Kim opened his wide mouth and 2 streams of fluid dripped from his teeth. Kim spat the venom directly into the lizard man's eyes, causing him to shriek in agony. The skin around his eyes began to peel away immediately. With bloodshot eyes, the lizard man looked up and screamed, "What is this?" In his vision, he saw Kim in his monstrous form. He couldn't believe it and muttered, "Venom, that's impossible." "This is lizard man venom, how can you—" Before he could finish, his vision blurred. The lizard man then lost consciousness and slumped directly into the swamp. Kim dragged the lizard man away and the swamp returned to silence. Scene change, the slime has just finished eating something. There was a skull left over. The slime, whose name is Win, spat the skull out after he was done eating and sat down to rest. Win muttered to himself, "These guys aren't anything special. Can't believe I only leveled up this much." Just then a scent drifted right to Win's nose, by reflex. Win followed the scent to the entrance of a cave. Seeing the smell wafting from within, he curiously asked, "What is this pungent smell?" He immediately used his sensory system to peer inside, saying, "Kim's skill biological sense." He instantly detected several glowing spots. Win said, "Well, there are quite a few of them." As he moved toward this cave entrance, Win excitedly thought, "Can't pass up an easy meal like this." Upon arriving, the sight before him made Win break into a cold sweat. Inside the cave, the corpses of the slaughtered lizardman tribe were scattered everywhere. Seeing this, Win continued, "No way." Win's expression shifted from fear to delight. He said, "Jackpot! I'm going to earn so much experience from this." Though he didn't know who had done this, he licked his lips and shouted, "But thanks for the meal!" Immediately, Win dove in and started eating the lizardmen corpses. After stuffing himself, he didn't forget to burp. Win then opened his status screen. He happily remarked, "Underwater breathing, venom spit, and even regeneration. What a total steal." Win was still intently looking at his status screen happily. The hero can had appeared behind him before he even knew it. He clenched his hands into fists. A moment later, Win finally realized someone was behind him. He glanced back and saw Can standing there. Win turned and asked, "Who are you?" Can just stood there. He narrowed his eyes to observe Win, thinking to himself, "I tracked the traces of the troll here, and I sensed killing intent." Seeing Win in front of him, Can wondered, "But it turns out to be just a slime." He told himself, "No, this isn't an ordinary slime." Seeing that Can didn't reply, Win frowned and shouted, "What are you staring at?" Can sensed the aura surrounding Win and silently evaluated this killing intent. Seeing Can still didn't answer, Win glared at him and said, "Ignoring me, huh? I asked you a question." Can tuned out all his words. There was only one thought in his mind. This creature is pure evil. Can remained silent for a long time before finally saying, "I am a warrior, and one of a warrior's principles is never to hide one's true identity." Hearing Can say that, Win immediately scowled and said, "Ha, a warrior, ha. In this world, that's the role of those destined to have everything stolen by the protagonist, isn't it? I bet this is just a sacrifice to help boost my development. Even in anime, the protagonist has to start by eating at least one dragon right. What a delusion. They gave me this useless warrior again." Can just stood there watching Win go on and on without saying a word. He frowned, looking down at Win on the ground, thinking to himself that although he didn't understand what Win was saying, he was definitely being insulting. Win continued, "Come to think of it, if you're a warrior, that means you were chosen by the goddess, right? Being chosen by such trash, you must be nothing but trash yourself." With that, Win let out a loud laugh, not noticing Khan's expression darkening. Win continued to laugh arrogantly, mocking Khan, saying that the goddesses in these worlds are just a bunch of brainless idiots. "I'll give her a spot in my future harem." The sword on Khan's back gleamed. He reached back and drew it, trembling with rage. He glared at Win, enunciating every word. "Countless people have insulted me before. Countless have cursed my parents, but I've ignored them all because a warrior must have compassion. But no one has ever dared to insult the goddess who created this good continent, and no one is allowed to do that. Can was so angry that the arm holding the sword couldn't stop shaking. Win, still convinced he was in the right, kept mocking him. Angry, aren't you? It's true that's why you're getting mad, right? The moment he finished his sentence, Khan's sword swung out. Win was caught off guard. Khan's expression was terrifying. He stared at him with such intense pressure that Win's entire body began to tremble. Khan shouted, "Shut your mouth!" Faced with Khan's fury, Win began to panic, his mouth stammering incoherently. Win gritted his teeth, sweat pouring down, but he still thought to himself, "What the hell? Why am I scared? I'm the protagonist here." Thinking this, Win seemed to regain his confidence, looking at Khan defiantly. "What you want to fight? Come on, then. I wonder what title I'll get for killing a warrior. Even if I don't get a title, I'm still going to devour all your skills." With that, Win began to open his mouth wide. Hearing those words, Khan immediately thought, "Devour skills." Before he could even finish his thought, Win transformed and grew larger, opening his huge mouth and shouting, "Die!" The very next second, as Win lunged forward, Khan's sword slashed through him. Instantly, Win was sent flying, a portion of his body severed and hitting the ground. Seeing this, Win began to panic. Khan reached out, casting a magic circle. Immediately, a circle of light appeared. As Khan cast the spell, he watched Win, thinking, even if it's a slime, once it's destroyed, they can't regenerate the lost parts. Having lost a part of his head, Win angrily cursed, "You bastard, don't get cocky." Right after that, Win started using his skill to regenerate super regeneration. The lost part of Win's slime body was restored. He gloated, "This super regeneration skill from the troll is great. It's practically a cheat code." Seeing this, Khan gripped his sword tighter and said, "As I thought, you are a calamity in the making. Begone, monster of destruction." As he spoke, Khan cast magic onto his sword. Win stopped confused and asked, "Huh, what are you talking about?" Khan held his sword high, pointing it straight at the sky. This is the technique of absolute judgment. Following that, a massive surge of holy light struck Win, forcing him to scream. The power made Win shrink smaller and smaller. Seeing this, he kept screaming loudly, "What is this?" Scene shift. Kim encounters the first human-like being in this world. With his animal head structure, he couldn't speak human language, but after eating the lizard man, he could speak normally even with a reptile's head. The body parts of mammals and reptiles are actually compatible. How interesting. Scene shift. At the lizard man tribe's swamp. The place was heavily guarded. Kim approached from a distance, thinking he needed more test subjects. A guarding lizard man immediately noticed his arrival. He opened his eyes wide to see Kim in the form of a lizard man walking toward him. The guard saw Kim and asked, "A lizard man." Another lizard man standing not far away saw Kim and screamed, "You idiots, that's not a lizard man, attack him!" The lizard soldiers followed orders, immediately using their weapons to attack Kim. 2 spears pierced his body, but Kim didn't even flinch. He spat poison from his hands and immediately shoved it into the face of one lizard man. The creature screamed in pain, and the other 2 hesitated. One of them shouted, "Everyone attack at once!" No sooner had he finished speaking than the others cried out in agony. Only one lizard man remained standing. He broke into a sweat, his voice trembling as he said, "Oh, Shichikwang!" Kim, holding a lizard man by the tail in each hand, advanced toward the last one. Then he reached out and gripped the lizard man's throat tightly. The lizard man's whole body shook and he struggled to gasp out, "Please help me." Scene shift back to Khan's side. On the ground, only the marks of the magic circle remained. Khan carried his sword on his shoulder and said, "Is it over?" Afterward, Khan sheathed his sword and turned away. Unexpectedly, a blob of Win's slime appeared and fell right into the center of the magic circle. Win was now just a small blob of slime trying to lift his head. Right after that, as Win moved into the cave, he muttered, "So dangerous. I have to recover quickly." Win's body was still melting, and he moved with great difficulty, saying, "My speed is too slow. I need to eat something. Anything will do. Damn warrior, one day I'll kill you." He was crawling into the cave, and just then he ran into Kim, who was returning to find no lizardmen left inside the cave. Kim immediately shouted, "Where the hell is everyone? Who the hell touched my stuff?" Just then, Win spotted Kim, secretly thinking to himself, "Food's here." Without hesitation, he lunged straight at Kim. In the filthy, foul-smelling room, piles of uncleaned trash were everywhere. This caused mold to thrive. Sitting in the middle of that stinking trash heap was a fat, sluggish guy hunched over a screen passionately playing his favorite video game. And that pig was Slim from his past life. He used to be a human whom everyone around him mocked and ridiculed because he was just a good-for-nothing. He couldn't do anything, but he justified it to himself by claiming that everything he did was just following his instincts, and living by instinct was every human's duty. That fat guy Slim never tried. If something was difficult, he wouldn't lift a finger. All day he only knew how to eat, sleep, and play, absolutely refusing to do things he felt he couldn't handle. And it didn't stop there. He was also a disrespectful, unfilial brat. He was nearly 40 years old with no job, forcing his parents to work their backs off to feed him, yet he still acted like a pitiful victim, and claiming his parents didn't fulfill their duty just because they disowned him for being fat and unemployed. That fat Slim hated his needy, useless life. He always hoped for a chance to change his life, and then by some miracle, that opportunity actually appeared. He woke up in another world in the body of a powerful slime, capable of absorbing anything he wanted and taking on that thing's abilities. That made him certain he was the chosen one, the protagonist of this world. But that Slim's beautiful dream hadn't even taken shape before it was crushed after a battle with a strange warrior. He met him on the road. He was terribly injured, but still optimistic, thinking this was just a challenge meant for a protagonist. He swore he would swallow every skill in this world to take revenge. Just as he finished speaking, Slim turned around and saw Kim standing behind him with a puzzled look. The veins on Kim's face were popping every muscle, showing his pure rage that someone dared to invade his base. That stupid slime thought Kim was food served on a silver platter, so he immediately lunged at him, intending to swallow Kim whole to satisfy his hunger. He leaped straight into Kim's mouth, intending to eat him from the inside. Kim hadn't even reacted yet before he accidentally swallowed the slime. From Kim's perspective, the first bad news in the last 2 weeks was that the cave he used as a laboratory was now unusable. The reason was that a slime had crawled in and ruined everything while he was out hunting the lizardmen, and even worse, it randomly launched itself into his mouth when he was off guard. But the good news was that Kim had merged with the slime, or more accurately, it brought its own demise by jumping into his mouth and getting digested. However, the slime's abilities were truly worth noting because the Monster Encyclopedia noted that a slime is a creature that can change form and evolve based on what it absorbs. They can typically eat all sorts of materials, from animals and reptiles like mice and insects to soil, poisonous plants, and even minerals. The book also mentioned that slimes that frequently eat minerals evolve into a form possessing the properties of that specific mineral. For instance, a metallic slime mainly absorbs minerals found near ore deposits, so it possesses metallization and metal detection skills. Normally, Kim couldn't eat minerals, or rather, he could swallow them, but he couldn't digest them. He also couldn't utilize their properties. Those minerals would eventually be excreted by his body. But the slime's diet isn't limited to living organisms. It also includes inanimate objects. Thanks to merging with the slime by swallowing it, Kim can now absorb minerals and simultaneously has the ability to turn his body into minerals. In the land of the ancient dragon in the great forest, the red dragon was gliding through the sky like an unnamed king. Because an ancient dragon lives in solitude, it doesn't really need a name, but there were still those who worshipped it, and they gave it a title. It was Crimson Light. Crimson Light drifted through the sky, and it was a mother dragon who loved her child dearly. In that monster-filled great forest, the lizardmen especially worshipped Crimson Light. They offered gold, silver, and various jewels to Crimson Light in exchange for the dragon's protection and prosperity for their species. However, ever since the dragon hatchling was born, Crimson Light had become quite indifferent to the race she once protected. Although she didn't want to leave the baby, she felt that if she just left for a brief moment, nothing would happen. So she took flight to find the lizardmen. While gliding over the dry forest, Crimson Light discovered unusual traces. That made her brake so hard she nearly nosedived into the ground. Seeing the aftermath of a battle and a brawl, she immediately suspected that someone had invaded her territory. Her dark red eyes widened in fury because someone dared to attack the lizardmen who were under her protection. Crimson Light roared loudly, swearing to make that person pay. As for Kim, the culprit behind the raid on the lizardmen, he was currently focusing on observing the changes in his body. When he tried to use his power to change his hand into a lizard man's hand, he discovered that this species' body was covered in a layer of tough scales. By his assessment, if only considering defensive capability, the skin of the diamond wolf was still superior. But that wasn't the important part. The special thing here was the mucus covering, the lizard scales. The lizard man's mucus didn't just have antibacterial properties. It also acted as a healing ointment. But there was one more important point. The mucus surrounding the scales and the slime's mucus could mix together. If he could eat hard metals and then turn the lizard's mucus into metallic slime, then his strength would surely increase significantly. But the problem was, where could he find the hard metal he wanted by using his Hawkeye skill? From high above, Kim could observe, gazing at the metal ore at the foot of the mountain over 100 meters away, the very spot currently being mined by the ogre tribe, Kim wondered if the giants down below were in ogre territory. He opened his monster encyclopedia. The average ogre stands over 2 meters tall, weighs about 150 kilograms, and possesses warrior-class skills, along with enhanced strength and vitality. They are the strongest tribe in the Great Forest, valuing dignity and pride above all else. Yet among them, some are so cruel they are regarded as monsters. Looking down from his high vantage point, Kim counted about 40 giant ogres. He closed the book, admitting to himself that 40 was far too many. Facing such odds, he had to come up with a plan to force them to leave the mine within a week. As he pondered, a dragon suddenly swooped over his head. It immediately caught his attention. Based on the lizard man's memories, Kim knew that dragon had a hatchling. Kim has the ability to swap brains with creatures, that he has eaten to access their memories, but if he replaces the entire brain, he loses his own sanity. So he only changed a part of it. And from that dragon, Kim hatched a plan that was incredibly insane and somewhat devious. Scene shift. Chigwang was currently holding a wolf in her jaws, dropping it onto the pile of animals she had hunted. As she piled them up, the hatchling suddenly called out. Chigwang turned around. "Mommy!" She bowed her head to look at her baby. "Listen closely to what I say, little one." She nuzzled her head against the hatchlings and continued in a low voice. "From now on, you must be a good baby and wait at home until Mommy returns, understand?" Hearing his mother say this, the hatchling followed after her and asked, "But what about practicing how to hunt? And what about taking a walk? When will I be able to go outside?" Hearing the hatchling ask that, Chigwang immediately sharpened her tone. "Don't even think about going outside when I'm not here." With that said, Chigwang raised her hand to draw magic circles and said, "The magic barrier is ready." Right after sealing the cave to prevent the hatchling from leaving, the mother dragon took to the sky and departed. The hatchling could only stand in the cave and watch her fly away. Just then, a hand grabbed onto the cave ledge. Rewind 30 minutes, Kim had reached the bottom of the cliff where the dragon's cave was carrying a beast he had hunted. As soon as he arrived, Kim muttered to himself, "This is the dragon's nest, right?" Using the lizard man's memories, he had found the lair. Standing below the nest, Kim whispered, "Easier than I thought." Kim suddenly tossed the deer in his hand toward the ground near the dragon's cave. Immediately, the mother dragon's magic spell caused the deer's mouth to burn. It turned black. Kim saw this and said, "Just as predicted. According to the lizard man's memories, this is a magic barrier." He reached his hand forward, and, to his surprise, the barrier didn't react to his hand at all. Kim frowned and said, "As expected, the barrier has no effect on creatures from Earth." He tossed the deer down there. Then he slowly moved forward. Back at the cave, right after that, a hand was seen grabbing the ledge. The hatchling was stunned to see something climbing up. It was Kim. He had changed the appearance of his hands and climbed into the cave. The hatchling backed away in fear. Kim stood up and complained, "Man!" He rubbed his neck, grumbling, "This place is too high." The lower jaw teeth of a red-scaled serpent, mixed with some animals from Earth, that was enough to fool the barrier. Kim glanced at the hatchling. The hatchling, though a bit scared, had still frowned and asked, "Who are you?" Kim didn't pay it any mind. His eyes were fixed on something else, a pile of glittering gold and jewels. Kim said, "I hit the jackpot." Seeing his gaze, the hatchling immediately became aggressive. It stood in front of the gold and shouted, "Get out! This is our home!" Kim ignored the hatchling's words. He approached the treasure pile and sat down to take a look. The hatchling's eyes followed him. Kim picked up some gold and exclaimed, "This is awesome! This place beats all the minerals in that mine." Seeing him touch the gold, the hatchling lunged at him, screaming, "I said get out! Before it could even touch him, Kim's hand clamped around its throat. The hatchling shrieked. Kim, unamused, said, "So noisy." The very next second, he casually threw the hatchling against the cave wall. The hatchling collapsed, muttering, "Mommy." 1 week later, Chigwang was flying back to her cave. As she flew, she muttered, "I couldn't find a single clue. 7 days have already passed." The mother dragon landed and stepped inside. Immediately, Chigwang felt that the cave was strangely quiet today. Confused, she said, "Usually the little one would excitedly run out to greet me." "Baby little one." The mother dragon's eyes fell upon the hatchling who was lying motionless. Seeing that, the mother dragon was extremely panicked and shouted, "Little one, what happened?" Receiving no response from the hatchling, the mother dragon immediately cast magic. Healing and restorative spells were applied to the hatchling's body. After a while, the hatchling slowly opened its eyes. Immediately after, the little one ran over to hug the mother dragon's head, crying and calling for her, seeing how much her baby was sobbing. Chigwang immediately picked up the little dragon and comforted her. "It's okay, little one, mommy is here now." Right after that, the mother dragon immediately asked the baby what had happened. The little dragon wiped her tears with her hand and said indignantly, "A brat with an underbite hit me and he took all the shiny things and the food you left for me." Upon hearing the little dragon's description, the mother dragon said furiously, "An underbite and reddish skin. The only ones in this forest who look like that are those scumbags. Dare to lay a hand on my baby, I'll make you taste hell." Immediately after, a roar of rage erupted from the dragon's cave. Kim, standing not far away, heard it too. Hearing the ear-piercing scream from the cave, Kim smirked and said, "Fast reaction, huh? Scene change currently at the orc tribe. Someone calls out for the elder. A tribe member pushes aside the tent flap and enters saying, 'We found something suspicious while on patrol.' He produces a knife still stained with blood and continues, 'This appeared in a bush near the village.' Elder Bernice picks up the dagger to examine it and says, 'How come a valuable antique like this is just lying in a bush?' Bernice brings it up to her nose to sniff and says, 'What's more, this scent? Is it dragon blood?' Just as she finished speaking, Chigwang found them flying right over Bernice's head. The mother dragon, eyes filled with rage, said, 'The time has come for you to pay for your actions. You scumbags!' Deep in the dense forest, a sea of fire suddenly erupted violently. That flame created by the giant dragon burned an orc to a blackened crisp. Looking at the bloodstains on this guy's sword, it quickly realized it was the scent of its precious baby's blood. That drove it mad, and it became certain that the orcs were the culprits who had raided its stash. The dying orc tried to warn his cohorts to run because they had walked right into a trap. The war between the enraged mother dragon and the orc tribe officially broke out from there. The sound of horns rang out, summoning all the orcs in the forest. The battle lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. Although the orc tribe won, countless orcs perished with only a dozen or so survivors. Those who remained left the great forest, leaving behind the corpses of the mother dragon and the fallen orc warriors. They became a hearty feast for Kim. From that moment on, the mother dragon was no more. Her little baby felt it. Her whole body trembled violently because she could no longer feel her mother. Tears streamed down the little dragon's face, and she let out a pitiful cry for her mother, her tears falling to the ground. Her body shook, and she sobbed uncontrollably. The little dragon gritted her teeth. She just stood there crying in grief. A moment later, she spread her wings and flew away. Since she had no mother left, she decided to leave this forest. Elsewhere, a book is opened listing the things I have eaten so far. First was the Kim Kang wolf. Second was the monster called the buffalo. Third was the lizard man. And next were the orcs. Finally, the dragons, plus many other types of monsters. The book is closed, for this person has already eaten clean everything mentioned in it. From then on, Kim had no reason to stay in this forest anymore. He decided to hitch a ride on an old man's carriage. He said that on this road, it is very easy to meet people suffering from memory loss, like him. As far as he knows, this place has everything from rejuvenating herbs items scavenged from monsters to the secrets of ancient kingdoms. That is exactly why everyone and their grandmother flocks here, searching for such things in hopes of changing their lives, but the result is that most of them end up on an altar. A lucky guy like him is a first for the old man, so he hopes he learns to value his own life more. Kim nodded in agreement as he heard him say that. By pretending to be injured in the forest and suffering from amnesia, I have dug up a lot of information about this place. Through the merchant elder on the way to a village, I know almost everything thanks to him. But there is one thing I still cannot understand. It is called the status board. They say that in this world, it is something that shows personal information that everyone possesses. You wonder, must be like an ID card then. You try to open your own status board, but for some reason I cannot access it. Perhaps it is because I do not come from this world. After a long and tiring journey, the old man brought Kim to a small city. He quickly stepped off the carriage. The old man turned back to wish him well and said that he could only take him this far. He bowed his head to thank him and stood watching the carriage drive further and further away. Afterwards, he turned to look at the small city right in front of him. Observing the flow of people and the scenery appearing before his eyes, he marveled, as expected of the city of Santo Cunagu. His eyes darted around. He saw that everything was quite clean, and there wasn't a speck of trash on the streets. He felt this place was even cleaner than he had imagined. Kim walked over to a bulletin board and saw several papers posted on it, such as, "Wash your hands to prevent the spread of disease," or "Disease and personal hygiene." After reading it, he felt that the people here were truly civilized. Suddenly he heard someone say that this city was strangely clean. Another person replied that it was only the area near the palace. That was so clean. The friend with him chimed in saying it was because the two princes grew up here, so naturally it's clean. He said that the two princes were the first to introduce the concept of hygiene in relation to disease. Since then, everyone has recognized the two princes as geniuses. When he was just 10 years old, his friend marveled. No wonder they are princes. He also revealed that next month the two princes would come of age, so they would be visiting this place. Both of them expressed that they really wanted to meet the two princes, while Kim just silently listened to the whole conversation. The concept of hygiene only became popular on Earth around the 21st century. A place like this which looks like the Middle Ages. And to think a kid actually came up with that concept. That's why he was just guessing, but he didn't seem sure. He just stood there like a ghost, then concluded that someone else might exist in this place. Just like him, someone carrying memories of Earth. And not long after I met him. The moment the second prince saw Kim, he was so shocked he couldn't believe his eyes. Kim just gave a sly grin, clearly amused. The second prince trembled, demanding to know why he was here. The second prince's true identity is Hispanic. He panicked and called Kim the Beast Merchant, then confessed his own story. My true name in my previous life was Eddie Montosa. I was a second-generation Mexican-American, a member of the UN International Police Force, and a CIA intelligence officer. I lived a truly elite life. But a nightmare struck and everything ended the moment I clashed with that monster. I died a miserable death, but after my death I found myself in a completely new world. While lost in that world, he kept his eyes tightly shut, too scared to open them. However, after a while, he gathered the courage to open his eyes and face reality. When he woke up, he had become a child named Edward II, Prince of the Canteen Kingdom. My second life was incredibly easy. From hygiene to science, astronomy, and countless other things, the knowledge from Earth turned out to be extremely useful in this medieval world. Furthermore, thanks to the special training from my past life, politics was as easy as pie for me. If I had been born as a commoner, I would have already been overpowered. Instead, I was royalty. Moreover, the first prince isn't the heir to the throne, or rather, he can't be so. No matter what, I will become the king. With that ideal in mind, Hispanic couldn't stop smiling. At this moment, he was parading through the streets amidst the cheers of the crowd, enthusiastically waving back his ambition to become king burning in his heart. But he had no idea that his living nightmare was lurking among the crowd. As night fell at Lord Santo Cunagu's mansion, he lay sprawled out on his bed. Exhausted from a day of parading and complaining that having to force a smile was pure torture, he suddenly heard a rustling sound. Turning toward the window, he saw a lizard's tongue, then nearly had a heart attack when he saw it climb into his room through the window. Despite his panic, he pulled out his sword and demanded to know who it was. He wondered to himself how a lizard man could have bypassed the guards and made it all the way in here. Suddenly, the lizard man said, "Long time no see," which left him even more confused. The lizard man then began to transform into Kim, asking, "Hispanic, don't you remember me?" The moment he saw Kim, he turned pale with fear, unable to believe his eyes, and cursed him as a damned monster, calling him the Beast Merchant. It seemed meeting him again terrified him so much that he had to reassure himself it was just a nightmare. Even though he said it was a nightmare, his body was already on the verge of collapsing. Sure enough, he passed out hard on the floor, which made Kim mutter that his reaction was really over the top. Suddenly, a servant's voice called out from outside, The person opened the door and apologized to Hispanic for disturbing him so late at night. But seeing him lying on the bed, the person assumed he was already asleep. Suddenly, the servant jumped in shock when looking to the side, wondering when that giant stuffed bear which Kim had transformed into had been placed there. However, he didn't bother paying attention to Kim anymore, turning back to call out to the prince, asking if he was sleeping. The servant's hand reached out for something. It turned out he intended to assassinate him with a hidden dagger, but before he could do anything, Kim used his claws to block the hand holding the knife, making the man turn in a panic. Seeing that Kim could move, the man was so scared he started rambling incoherently. Kim calmly said that since Hispanic couldn't die yet, the servant would have to die in his place. As soon as he said that, Kim took him out right there in the room, but it seemed he was a bit careless and made too much noise, finishing him off. Consequently, he accidentally drew a group of nearby guards running toward the room. They kicked the door open and shouted while Kim was still finishing the other guy. Seeing them arrive, Kim felt he had made a mountain out of a molehill. The other three were terrified to see a giant monster Kim standing in the room. Suddenly, one of them said that since it had come to this, they would switch to Plan B. They all lunged at once, wanting to take out both Kim and Hispanic. Kim stood still, looking at the guy he had just sent to the afterlife. Then he looked at the rest of them, wondering if they were on the same side, but he didn't bother thinking about it. He immediately grabbed Hispanic and carried him out, jumping straight out of the room through the window. Kim landed gently, but the prince face planted on the ground. After that, Kim took off, not forgetting to carry the prince along, reasoning that he would save him in another location. Meanwhile, someone was busy taking notes. Outside that person's room, a hurried report echoed, "Lord, it's an emergency!" Baron Kanago heard this and immediately asked what happened. The guy who had just tried to take out Panic pretended to be worried, reporting to him that the prince had been kidnapped by an intruder. Hearing this, the Baron slammed his hand on the table in a panic, already suspecting who the culprit was. He was furious, wondering how that person dared to do such a thing within his own territory, so he ordered his troops to go and rescue the prince. The mole agreed on the surface, but was laughing sinisterly inside. On the hillside, Kim returned to his human form, panting like an ox, wondering how many guys were chasing him. That caused him to run out of breath. At this moment, Hispanic had also woken up. Seeing this, Kim started to ask him how he was, but the moment the prince came to and saw Kim, he was terrified again. You beast, he thought, horrified. Is this not a dream? Seeing him foam at the mouth and pass out in such an awkward silence, he couldn't even be bothered to look at him anymore. How on earth did you end up here? Hispanic was stunned, completely unable to fathom why Kim had appeared in this place. As for Kim, he couldn't make sense of it either. How did that guy manage to show up here? His expression turned cold instantly, his gaze sharpening to a blade. He gritted his teeth and demanded an explanation for why this Hispanic was here. Hispanic was so terrified he ground his teeth, cold sweat drenching him. He couldn't guess what Kim was plotting when suddenly a thought flashed through his mind. Was he planning to extract the secret of his rebirth and then kill him all over again? As if reading his mind, Kim immediately reassured him, telling him not to worry, he wouldn't kill him. Hearing that, Hispanic looked visibly shocked, his face filled with suspicion. Really, promise me. I don't know what kind of power he used to force a promise out of Kim, but naturally Kim just shrugged and replied, I'm not sure about that, so I can't promise you anything. At that moment, Kim's face grew even colder. He gave a cold laugh, looked straight at Hispanic, and said it seemed he had already made him pay for his betrayal. Hispanic froze at the mention of the past, his whole body trembling. He clenched his fists and, gathering all his courage, asked if he was planning to send all the traitors to the afterlife, to meet their ancestors. If so, he apologized in advance because there was no way he would cooperate. Not letting him finish, Kim struck directly at his psychological state. Don't you see it? I'm just sending him and his squad off to the afterlife. Yet Jenner Lighting and the others involved in this are still alive and well. Right now, Hispanic is considered dead and Kim has vanished, so who's really benefiting from all this? Hearing that, his face darkened instantly as if Kim had struck a nerve. Kim continued, It seems everyone else except for you has been promoted and is living a happy life, right? That remark pushed his anger to the limit. The veins on his forehead bulged. Thinking about the others getting promoted and dancing in joy, his rage boiled over. Looking at their departing backs, he couldn't help but feel bitter about his own fate. Clearly, he was the one who had worked the hardest, yet he was the one stuck in this backward civilization. He seemed to have finally woken up. It simultaneously awakened the demon within him. Comradeship? How ridiculous, forget it. From now on, he was no longer Eddie Montana. He was Prince Edward of the Gokkan Kingdom, specifically Elmo. After a long psychological struggle, Hepanek finally made his move. He reached out his hand toward Kim and said decisively, "Fine, whatever. I'll cooperate with you." As if waiting for just those words, Kim broke into a look of satisfaction and contentment. He reached out to shake his hand, but even then, Hepanek's mind was still a mess. He assumed Kim's current plan was to return to Earth and dispose of everyone who had betrayed him. Until they found a way back to Earth, the first thing they had to do was wipe out those bastards, and then keep this place safe. Until that time came, Hepanek planned to use Kim as a stepping stone for his own agenda. He wasn't the only one plotting his moves. Kim on his side was thinking much the same thing. He was quite pleased with the turn of events, because collaborating with the Prince of a Kingdom would obviously bring him countless benefits. Naturally, both the quantity and quality of the information he could get would be far beyond what he had before. His face showed clear satisfaction. Furthermore, this wasn't a bad choice at all if he knew how to return to Earth. It was as if they were telepathic. They didn't even have to say it yet, their minds were on the same wavelength. Both wanted to use the other to achieve their own goals. So let's look into the root of this, shall we? Kim seemed to have told Hepanek the whole truth. He scowled and grimaced. "Assassination, is it that sleazy old man?" At this point, Kim had finished wrapping the bandages around his midsection. He truly hadn't expected to hear this, yet Hepanek could still remain so calm. Hepanek stood up and replied casually that he was so calm because he was already too used to these kinds of things. "Anyway, let's get going." However, at that moment he laughed and turned to Kim, asking if his position would be a key factor in helping him with this plan. "Right. And one noteworthy thing in the near future is that both he and Kim would be participating in the coming-of-age ceremony." Thinking back to about 300 years ago, Emperor Edward was the first king of this kingdom. He once went hunting and stopped to stay the night at the Canago Tavern. At that time, he wore a blue cape accompanied by 2 guards and was quite pleased with the host's hospitality. Therefore, to repay him, the king granted him the title of Baron. Not only that, he looked incredibly happy, grinning from ear to ear and giving a thumbs up to show his satisfaction. That very event marked the beginning of the Santo Cunugu Hotel, and also became the source of power for the Cunugu Baron family ever since. The Cunugu Baron became one of the 5 most powerful families thanks to the support of the royal family. Naturally, as long as the royal family's power remained, the status of the Cunugu family would continue to flourish. Conversely, if the royal family were to disappear, the Cunugu family would collapse instantly. From that, it could be concluded that the Baron would do anything. Pouring all his energy into holding on to the throne, one of the assassins was convinced the Baron would deploy his troops. Just as the assassin was lost in thought, a soldier shouted that he'd found the prince. The assassin was stunned. He couldn't believe it had happened so fast. At that, the Baron started breaking into a cold sweat, demanding the soldier to confirm if it was really true. "If that's the case, bring the prince here at once." The other assassin immediately stepped in to stop him, panicked because they weren't ready yet, while the soldier stood there stammering and confused, because the prince had already come here himself. The 2 of them froze instantly as if struck by lightning. Standing below the castle walls were Hepanek and Kim in a different disguise. As soon as he saw Hepanek, the Baron pushed his way through the guards to look down, shouting down at him to ask if he was all right. Seeing the Baron peek out, Hepanek gave him a look as if they had a blood feud from 8 lifetimes ago. "Oh, there you are." Just as the Baron was about to head down to greet the prince, Hepanek unexpectedly ordered him to arrest his own troops. The Baron thought his old ears were playing tricks on him and asked Hepanek to repeat himself. "What was that?" Prince Hepanek gritted his teeth, fuming as he told the Baron that it was his very own subordinates who had tried to assassinate him last night. Then he pointed directly at Kim. He claimed that thanks to his secret bodyguard, he had managed to stay safe until now. Hepanek looked up at the crowd standing above, realizing he was completely outnumbered. He had no choice but to run. The Baron and the assassin were dripping with cold sweat. An assassination? Really? The assassin immediately screamed at the Baron not to be fooled, pointing a finger at Kim and insisting that the prince was being held hostage by him, which was why he was pinning all the blame on them. Listening to this loudmouth's nonsense, I couldn't help but scoff. Hepanek looked absolutely livid, his face darkening as if he were about to explode. "How dare you spew such absurdity at me, you insolent fool!" he growled, clearly outraged at being talked down to. Hepanek reached his breaking point, his killing intent flaring so intensely it made even the assassin jump. Hepanek roared, "I am a direct descendant of Edward the Great. I am the heir to his title. Did you really think I'd be scared into silence just because of your threats? Hibanek looked ready to spit fire. With one final devastating sentence, he completely silenced the assassin, leaving him too terrified to utter another word. Your blasphemy could be considered treason. The prince's words hit so hard the assassin stumbled back, speechless. The Baron watched Hibanek and Kim, observing their reactions closely. Kim had remained silent the whole time. To the Baron, he looked a bit rough, but the metallic sheen on his armor was definitely mithril. Combined with the plating, made from the scales of a red dragon, it was clear he couldn't possibly be the kidnapper. The Baron's judgment was sharp indeed. He had to rethink everything and decide who he should actually trust. This realization terrified the assassin even more. Arrest them, the Baron commanded, and his soldiers moved in. Kim was taken aback. He hadn't expected things to be resolved so quickly. Hibanek smirked at him as if to say, "Is that all?" Before long, the assassins were tied up, not a single one escaping, facing the captured men. Hibanek spoke softly. "You know something, don't you?" The guy sneered. "Kunagu, one of the kingdom's great houses. They have so many secrets outsiders couldn't possibly imagine." He licked his lips, looking like a total thug. Hibanek leaned in, placing a hand on the man's shoulder, and whispered, "One of those secrets is the brutality of their torture." The prince's face went dark, his eyes and twisted smile serving as a haunting warning. "Don't think you're getting out of this easily." The assassin broke into a cold sweat pouring off him like a waterfall. He couldn't wrap his head around how things had gone so wrong. Everything had been planned perfectly, hadn't it? Heh. A sudden laugh caught his attention. Despite his growing unease, he looked up, following the sound. Standing right in front of him was Kim, staring down with cold eyes. Driven to the brink of madness, the assassin squeezed his eyes shut and cursed Kim for ruining his perfect plan. He demanded to know who he was. Suddenly, Kim leaned down, pushed his hood back, and revealed a bear mask underneath, paralyzing the assassin with pure terror. No content provided in input continued from previous line. He immediately flashed back to that moment. You, he stammered. Kim's eyes narrowed into a savage, animalistic grin as he whispered 3 words, "Rest in peace." He pulled his hood back up just as the soldiers dragged the assassin away. As the assassin was hauled off, screaming, "You monster!" Kim finally explained his armor. It turned out he had taken it from a house. He had taken a display suit of armor and a piece of wood covering them in slime mucus, and for some reason, the slime looked pretty annoyed, but that didn't matter. In the end, he had transformed those old items into mithril alloy which he'd obtained from the dragon's treasure hoard. He had to admit slime had endless uses. That was how he had so easily fooled the Baron. Now facing the Baron again. The Baron reported that the assassins had spilled everything because they couldn't handle the torture. Their group was called Meitu Meisut, the Messengers of Hell. The Baron looked incredibly grave. He never imagined such people had infiltrated the prince's personal guard. He asked Kim if he knew anything about them. A thought flashed through Kim's mind. This was the perfect time to bring up what he'd discussed with the prince. They both stood there facing the Baron. Kim began speaking to the Baron slowly. "Meitu Meisut? I think I heard that name from a knight once." The Baron asked, "Is that true? I heard rumors that Queen Everzone, the second queen, died of a sudden illness, but the truth is she was poisoned." The Baron's face went pale instantly. "Poisoned? If that's true, then the culprit must be—" Their thoughts aligned perfectly, and Kim gave a slight nod. The Baron's hand shook as he clenched it into a fist, unable to believe such a thing had happened. Suddenly, the Baron slammed the table and jumped up, his sword already in his hand, radiating killing intent. "I won't let them get away with this." Just then a hand landed on his shoulder. Kim had appeared behind the Baron so quietly that he jumped in surprise. Kim calmly advised him to stay composed, his eyes glowing with a crimson light. Even from behind the mask, it was terrifying. Kim reminded the Baron that these people were professional assassins targeting powerful figures. He absolutely could not underestimate them. The Baron turned and asked what he was supposed to do. Should he just stand by and watch? Kim tightened his grip on the Baron's shoulder. "This is not your fight," Kim said clearly. He then pressed down, forcing the Baron back into his chair so hard the man lost his balance and couldn't even keep hold of his sword. Once again, Kim emphasized that this was a matter between him and them. With just that one move, he made the point crystal clear. The Baron was convinced that with power like that, he would definitely be able to pull it off. Then he took his hand off the Duke's shoulder, saying that this matter would be resolved sooner or later because the prince had already found a clue. Hearing that the Baron's face showed deep suspicion, turning to look at him, he said, "If it's the prince, I'll believe it." Only then did Kim realize that the man was very obedient to the prince. Immediately after, he turned and started walking away, because the ceremony was about to end. So he asked for permission to leave first. The Baron remained seated, his face expressionless. He called out to him, and the last words he wanted to say were, he hoped he would look after the prince. He just waved his hand slightly as if to say, "Don't worry." He said that, but in his heart he thought differently. Truly, he would let him live until he had finished dealing with everything else. As for what would happen after that, he wasn't sure. At that moment, a royal carriage was rolling along. Inside, two people were discussing the clues regarding the assassins who were targeting them. It turned out the people in the carriage were Hispanic and Kim. When Kim finished speaking, he smirked and replied that it was all just fabrication. This guy thought that looking for clues was quite absurd because he already knew who the culprit was. Kim was full of questions, so he asked who it was. Hispanic's face darkened, revealing a sly look. He didn't state the identity directly, but just told him that they would meet him at the palace anyway. Waiting until then to tell him would be much more interesting. This immediately stirred up curiosity in him, making him eager to know. At that time, he told him to put this matter aside for now. It seemed he had something he wanted to ask him earlier. It was indeed true he wanted to ask about the status window. The prince rested his chin on his hand, thinking as he asked, "Could it be that you can't access it?" According to Kim's speculation, perhaps the reason he couldn't access it was that he didn't belong to this world. The prince frowned. That's strange. When he opened the status window, a natural landscape appeared, along with some specific details. For example, the continent's name is Elmos, a land protected by the goddess, a place where humans and monsters coexist in peace. According to Hispanic, not just humans, but all creatures in this world possess a status window. People can use their perception skills to see others' status windows, and of course, this Hispanic fellow also had a perception skill. He pointed at him. He said that once, while trying to use the skill on him, he caught a glimpse of a status window. Seeing that he didn't react, he decided to handle it himself to be quick. A magic circle appeared on his hand perception, but after casting the skill, strangely no status window appeared. He looked clearly confused. "Why is there nothing? Did I miss a step?" Thinking for a while, suddenly Hispanic discovered something. Out of the blue, he told him to transform into some kind of animal. This left him extremely confused. Though he didn't understand, he still followed instructions. With the front paws of a grizzly bear, his arm began to change shape. Looking at his transformed hand, he suddenly remembered he had eaten this bear in Alaska. The taste wasn't anything special. He didn't know why. Suddenly, he was evaluating food. However, at that moment, Hispanic told him not to transform into an earth creature. He suggested that he try transforming into something that came from this world. At that very moment, he immediately realized something. He began to turn his arm into a hawk's wing. Once again, he used perception, and this time the status window actually appeared. The species name and level sections had no information. Only the skills section clearly stated, Enhancement Level 3, Vitality Boost Level 6. Seeing the information window appear, the prince happily laughed because his guess was indeed correct. Looking at the window, Kim also seemed to wake up and understand the problem. Hispanic smirked. It seemed Kim didn't have an information window because he didn't come from this world. But once he transforms into something belonging to this place, then all problems would be solved. At this, he wore a sinister smile. No, that wasn't all. Instantly, he turned his hand into the claw of a lizard man. The skin was of a buffalo, the scales were of a viper, and he himself was a Vajra ape. Immediately, the status window changed. Besides the original enhancement and vitality boost, now appeared Rapid Regeneration Level 7. Negative Effect, Resistance Level 3, Roar Level 5. It didn't stop there. There was also a dragon, seeing him transform more and more. Hispanic panicked. "Hey, wait, hold on." After that, Kim tried every monster he had eaten until now. He held the book while transforming, making the other guy unable to help, but exclaimed that he ate so much. It kept repeating like that until the status window completely stopped changing. The final result of the status window was Name None, Species. None Level 0, Skills Enhancement, Level 3, Vitality Boost Level 6, Rapid Regeneration Level 7, Negative Effect, Resistance Level 3, Roar Level 5, Venom level 10. Dragon scales level 10. Toughness level 10. At this point, he wondered if the word none meant it didn't exist. In his head, a thought popped up that his existence was like a system error in the status window. A few days later, "We're here, Your Highness." The carriage stopped. Hispanic stepped down with Kim. At this point, he had also transformed. In front of them was the building of the assassins. He asked if he was ready, because they were about to meet the leader of the assassins. He smirked, reminding him that when he saw him, he shouldn't be too surprised. The two approached the door, but the two guards didn't try to stop them at all. He looked serious, saying that the person behind this door was the leader. The door slowly opened, but just a slight crack was enough to leave him shocked to the extreme. Given the situation, it's no wonder why you're so shocked. Deep in the shadows, a figure sitting on a throne slowly comes into view, an old man looking stern and terrifying. "So you've returned my son." Kim is stunned because this old man is not just the leader of the assassin guild, he is the king of this land. Kim and Prince Hibanik arrive to see the king. The prince speaks up, "Prince Edward of Gokkantin requesting an audience." "I have returned safely, Your Majesty." The king tilts his head, resting his chin on his hand, and replies, "I have already been informed. It is good that you are safe." Though he says this, the king's face shows not a trace of joy. Inside his head, he's thinking, how the hell did he manage to escape? Prince Hibanik reports that it is all thanks to the loyal servants the king prepared for him. But in his heart, the prince thinks loyal servants, more like assassins. The two men's cold, sharp gazes lock across the grand hall. Standing nearby, Kim thinks to himself, even I can tell they're just provoking each other. Suddenly, the king turns to Kim. Kim, still kneeling next to the prince, hears the king ask, "You there, you're this Kim fellow, right?" The cold tone of the king's voice makes the air grow heavy. "This is the first time I've ever heard that name, and the first time I've heard that you are a secret bodyguard." Kim senses the pressure and wonders, is this the aura of a monarch? He glances sideways at Prince Hibanik, but honestly, he doesn't find it all that special. "I've even eaten dragon meat, so what do I have to fear from some king?" The king thinks to himself, silently impressed. He certainly has the courage of a knight. Then he turns to Hibanik and asks, "Can you hand this companion of yours over to me?" Hibanik immediately refuses. "I apologize, but I must decline your request for 2 reasons. The king wants to know why. Hibanik explains that first of all, he is not an object. He is a human being. I do not own him, so I cannot hand him over to you. The prince pats Kim on the shoulder and continues. Secondly, Kim and I are close friends. Even though I am the second prince, I have no older brother, so we have sworn a brotherhood. Kim, hearing this, breaks into a genuinely sincere smile, gives a thumbs up to Hibanik and says, "I really appreciate you too, brother." After saying that, they both look at each other and laugh loudly, echoing through the room. Watching that scene, the king is so furious that veins pop out all over his face. He asks the prince, "You said, brother..." Then the king angrily slams his hand down on the armrest and shouts, "If there is nothing else, get out!" Back in his room, Hibanik drinks wine and laughs loudly at the earlier greeting. Hibanik excitedly winks at Kim and says, "Thanks, brother. You really helped me out back there." A stranger suddenly appears, wearing a full suit of armor made of mithril, one of the kingdom's rarest resources. The king must be very confused because Kim helped the prince gain the upper hand. So the prince decides to give Kim a reward, a set of enchanted armor. As Kim tries it on, he asks the prince, "You've never beaten him, have you?" The prince sighs and answers, "No. Since I was 10, he has been training children from orphanages all across the kingdom." According to the prince, besides being taught basic servant duties, they were also trained in information gathering and even assassination. The king planted servants from those orphanages into every noble and royal household to eliminate anyone who stands in his way. That was how the king seized the throne, even though he was just the 4th prince. At this point, Prince Hibanik is incredibly angry. He smashes the wine bottle in his hand and lets out a curse. The prince grinds his teeth and says bitterly, "That was clearly my idea too." Witnessing that rage, Kim thinks you and that old man are no different. Hibanik laughs, looking incredibly satisfied, and says, "Because I told him I'd sworn brotherhood with a total stranger." Even though he acted normal on the outside, I'm sure he was panicking on the inside. Looking at that face of his, that felt great. Thinking about that. Hibanik is so satisfied that he can't stop grinning. Just then, someone kicks open the door and calls out, "Brother." The person who just arrived is Princess Elena of Gok Canteen. In a big, puffy, cumbersome blue dress, she rushes into the room. She asks Hibanek, "I've heard what happened. How could you act so rudely in front of father?" Kim immediately steps in front of her, ordering her to stay put and not come any closer. Prince Hibanek watches this scene, and the princess raises her voice. "How dare you give me orders? Do you know who I am?" Kim remains firm and coldly replies, "This is the prince's private room. You barged in without knocking." Princess Elena stubbornly shouts back, "How dare you!" Kim doesn't back down. He immediately draws his sword, slashing straight at the princess. The blade stops only when it's right against her neck, leaving her gasping in terror. Kim speaks up, warning her, "There will not be a next time." Princess Elena collapses to the floor, weak. Just then, Prince Hibanek shouts, "Stop, Mr. Kim!" The prince moves toward his shaking younger sister and asks, "Elena, are you all right?" Seeing the princess terrified, Prince Hibanek gently takes her hand to help her up. While she is still sobbing, he speaks softly to reassure her, "Please forgive him. He's just concerned about your safety, that's all. He didn't mean any harm." After finishing his sentence, Hibanek calmly led her to the door and spoke in a gentle, hushed tone, telling her, "Just go home for now. We'll talk another time." Once the princess had left, the moment the door clicked shut, Prince Hibanek's expression shifted instantly, his voice grinding as he spat, "That foolish woman." Kim asked, "Is that your sister?" Prince Hibanek clenched his fist, his face filled with resentment as he told Kim, "Yeah, I already told you about her back in the carriage. She was granted power by the goddess. She's the very first person I'm going to take down. When I become king." Eleanor Gancanton is the youngest of the 3 surviving children of King Edward IV. The other 3 were weeded out during the selection process, and they're resting in the royal cemetery now. From the moment she was born, the goddess gave her the power to go wherever she pleases. Right now, she's obsessed with the next reincarnation of Hibanek, Edward Gancanton. Even if they have different mothers, how could she possibly be in love with her own brother? Hearing this, Kim remarked, "She's insane. I was just asking for the sake of caution. Do you have any intention of accepting her feelings?" Hibanek looked annoyed as he replied, "That's not a funny joke." Hibanek repeated, "I told you I already explained it to you." The second queen was poisoned. The one who lured her to tea and forced her to drink it was the first queen, her mother. That memory made Hibanek's resentment flare up even more, as the second queen was his own mother. The prince continued, "She is the daughter of the first queen, the one who rose to favor after my mother passed away." Kim probably understood why Hibanek was so furious. He spoke up, "Damn. So your sister was born out of your mother's death." But then Kim noticed something odd and asked, "Wait a second, if the king wasn't the one who killed the second queen, then why do you hate him so much?" Hibanek explained that this had to do with the first prince, but he refused to elaborate further because he couldn't speak of the first prince, unless that person is present here, or has given permission to speak of him. Kim skeptically asked why he was hiding this. Hibanek made it clear to him that he couldn't do otherwise because he had sworn an oath to the goddess. After speaking, the prince stepped forward to adjust his cloak and hair, calmed his nerves, and told Kim, "All right, let's go, brother." And the two stepped outside. Kim asked, puzzled, "You're not going to deal with the failed assassination attempt?" And Hibanek replied, "They say the gods get angry if a son is killed inside his own home, so the old man tried to get me out of the palace. Many, many times, but I've already completed the coming-of-age ceremony, which means I'm fully qualified to be the next king." Hibanek said triumphantly, "He can't just send me away whenever he feels like it anymore." He then turned to add for Kim, "The kingdom is crawling with people who support that old man. We have to prioritize solving this issue first, for example, by winning over the prime minister who holds all the financial power." While looking at Kim, the prince accidentally bumped into someone and fell hard onto the ground, feeling a sharp pain. The prince touched his cheek and said, "What the hell? Whoever you are, I'm going to punish you. How dare you block the prince's path?" Then Hibanek looked up. The person standing before him was the prince's older brother, the warrior who was reaching out a hand to help him up, asking kindly, "Are you all right, little brother?" The king muttered to himself, "Brothers, you say?" He curled his lips into a contemptuous smile, thinking to himself, quite a surprise. He himself was the one who had slaughtered all his own brothers for the sake of the throne. To the king, those blood-related brothers were nothing but obstacles. But Hibanek had a sworn brother. In his eyes, that was nothing short of an insult. His plan had succeeded, but at the same time it set a bad precedent. It was as if should a better precedent appear, this problem would be solved. Those who passed the selection test were all educated based on their capabilities fairly so that the eldest son could rule the kingdom properly. His second son would operate in the shadows and find ways to eliminate any obstacles in the eldest son's path. His eldest daughter was very intelligent and beautiful, so he intended to arrange a political marriage for her. But contrary to all his calculations, the abilities of the eldest son and the second son far exceeded what was necessary. The second son was so wicked that he even wanted to dispose of those who had already been disqualified, while the eldest son was so righteous that he chose to become a warrior for the goddess. The eldest son of the royal family, Gancanton, had vanished just like that. Now only the violent and cunning second son and the standard-bearer eldest daughter remained. The king gripped his fist tightly in anger. He would rather let his eldest daughter take the throne than let that snake-like cunning son become king. He cannot become king. Hibanek looked at his brother with a look full of apprehension, but then, suddenly remembering his status had changed, Hibanek hurriedly bowed to the warrior in front of him. The warrior returned the prince's salute and said this was a serious matter. We should go to the audience chamber together. As a soldier following behind Hibanek couldn't help but be surprised to see the one chosen by the goddess with his own eyes. Someone who gave up their social status with a straightforward and kind personality, that's the eldest son. If protected by the goddess, they must be very strong. Just looking at the warrior's appearance is enough. It's enough to gauge their true strength. He followed them to meet the king, silently thinking that the warrior might become an obstacle in his plan. The warrior stood alone, facing the king sitting on the throne with his children and several nobles on both sides. The king glanced at Hibanek with annoyance. "You're here again. I don't want to see you." Hibanek didn't back down and glared right back. "I don't want to be here either." The king quickly composed his expression to welcome the son who should have been king. "Welcome, warrior. Our kingdom welcomes you with all our hearts." The warrior hurriedly returned the gesture. "Thank you, your majesty." The king asked about the serious matter he wanted to discuss. The warrior didn't beat around the bush and said straight out, "Yesterday, I received the power of holy light from the goddess." The moment he finished, everyone around was stunned in shock. The power of holy light. The warrior continued, "I have received confirmation from the church's saintess, and I will be going on an expedition for a week. I want your army to support me." "Of course I will allow you to go with them," the king mused for a moment. Panic slammed his hand on the table in frustration, followed by a curse. He muttered in a panic, "It's ruined, everything's ruined. Damn it, the Demon King, right when we were about to make our move." Kim asked, confused, what was actually going on. That was when Hibanek remembered that he didn't know the common affairs of this place. A demon with bright red skin and long, sharp horns, they are a species hostile to humans. Their king is called the Demon King. Under the arrangement of the goddesses, the two races have always maintained a hostile balance. When the balance of power shifts to one side, the goddess creates a warrior on the other. However, if that gap isn't bridged, it makes the warrior stronger and drains the power of the holy light. The power of holy light means that even when killing the king of the other race, the divine will not condemn them. Normally, the demon king would receive the same treatment as all of the goddess's creatures, but a warrior bearing the power of holy light can destroy the demon king. After hearing the explanation, Kim still didn't understand where the core issue lay. Hibanek clenched his fists, unable to believe he still didn't understand, so he had to keep explaining. At the time the holy light descends, humanity will be backed into a corner. As a member of the royal family after my coming-of-age ceremony, I am obligated to join the battle. For the sake of the country's reputation, that damn old man will force me to the front lines. Even if I survived and returned, the previous negotiations would be denied. Hibanek screamed in pain. The next day, just as he said, the king ordered Hibanek to go to the battlefield. Unable to disobey, he had no choice but to comply obediently. The king happily praised his son in front of everyone. "I didn't expect him to value honor and duty so much. I can finally see the qualities of a prince." Finishing, he smirked as if he had just achieved what he wanted. A carriage was prepared specifically for the two princes and Kim. The princess stood from above, watching the figure of her brother silently. Elena wiped away her tears, hoping in her heart that her brother would return safely. Hippanic didn't know why he felt a chill down his spine. Not knowing if someone was cursing him, he stammered for Kim to get on the carriage, and they left the palace. The carriage, carrying the prince and the other soldiers, sped along the road. Inside the carriage, Kim was surprised to see him obey the king so obediently. Hippanic crossed his arms, bored. What other choice is there? I'll just have to achieve something big and come back to deal with that old man properly. And what's the situation outside? Kim darted his eyes around, feeling the surroundings were still quiet, but it seemed they were plotting something. Someone was slowly approaching the carriage. Hippanic was extremely annoyed. That damn old man. He really didn't forget me. Tell me the position. Back right, heading toward the rear wheel. Looks like he's going to break the defense. Kim glanced, asking, "Do you want me to take him out?" He immediately answered, "If the defense is broken, the Kazavan wall will also weaken." The attacker swung his sword toward the carriage. A magic protection ring cracked the blade. It seemed the guy didn't care at all and immediately moved to step 2. The soldiers immediately cast Fireball. The carriage driver saw everything was prepared and also started to act. But before he could even move, a sound of braking echoed from behind. They hadn't realized what was happening before they saw several men knocked unconscious. Everyone panicked. "What's going on?" Flames slammed into the carriage wheels with a loud thud. One after another, they threw fireballs at the prince. Just as they were about to strike again, the figure in the carriage turned into their own teammate. That guy was burned all over, screaming in pain. The other guy saw it and hurriedly apologized. Inside the carriage, a giant black shadow suddenly appeared. It even had 3 huge horns. Its blood-red eyes didn't look very friendly. Kim transformed into a beast and stepped off the carriage while Hippanic sat proudly in his seat. His eyes flashed with a bit of panic when he saw him turn into a monster. Kim replied, "For now I'm on your side. Get used to it." Both stepped outside, facing the soldiers who had been causing trouble. One of them was surprised by the appearance of a monster. Kim took a deep breath to gain momentum. Then he howled at the crowd and the horses. Sure enough, the horses were scared by that howl. The soldier immediately used magic to control them. The spirit of the horses, which were still terrified, calmed down instantly. The person standing behind saw the commander use that spell and felt worried, but he didn't care. He just shouted, "Everyone focus on completing the mission, then we will fix the soldiers' minds later. I will lead finishing." He drew his sword and rushed forward. Sword and stupid men followed one after another, rushing like moths to a flame. Inside Kim's mouth, a fierce fire ignited. He breathed fire at the crowd who didn't know their own limits. The leader was instantly burned to ashes. He chuckled silently. "Is this a dragon's fireworks? The power is quite impressive. And I can use it again after something called..." It is better for Kim to use the spirits to his advantage than to engage them head-on while the soldiers following behind are furious to see their major taken down so easily. Another fool steps up, demanding Kim's life, and slashes his sword straight at Kim's shoulder. But instead of blood, the blade chips and Kim grabs the horse's tail. He then swings it away, sending the rider tumbling headfirst into the ground. Realizing things have taken a turn for the worse, they decide to retreat and flee. "We need to relay this news to the entire battalion." They say, not forgetting to pray for their major to return safely. But before the words are even out, the person running beside them is hit by dragon fire. Burned to ashes in the blink of an eye, the speed was so fast, the naked eye couldn't even track what happened. A quantum beam, 2 rays of light, pierced through the bodies of the 2 remaining runaways. Kim wonders what kind of magic that was, and Hippanic doesn't hesitate to reveal, "My talent is light magic. I was born gifted with light magic." But Kim never expected someone born in such a dark place to specialize in holy light, and even Hippanic admits that much. Finishing their long journey, the 2 stop at a large inn where the 2 princes are having a meal with him. Kim complains that if Hippanic hadn't refused to go with the warriors, none of this would have happened. He wipes his mouth and replies, "If I had gone with the warriors, they wouldn't have had the chance to kill me. Their master must have planned it that way, but we still have some time." Until they meet the others, he asks if Kim has any more questions. Kim thinks for a moment, then speaks up. "What about the power of the holy light? Wouldn't something like that be an attack against the demon race? Wouldn't harming the goddess's chosen warrior be considered treason?" Interesting question. I'll get straight to the point. You are allowed to kill a warrior gifted with holy light. The goddess's attack is... well, it means the power of the holy light is exempt from everything. Even if a warrior is killed, the demon king isn't charged with any crime. However, that has never happened. He says, starting to pick his teeth. Perhaps if the Demon King killed the warrior, then humanity would also come to an end. Meaning we are too weak, Kim mutters. A life or death battle, huh? My own life isn't much different. Hypanic frowns in confusion. What is that supposed to mean? You act as if you aren't part of this war at all. Kim calmly replies, well, I'm not. Hypanic starts to feel a sense of fear rising in his heart, hoping he isn't ignoring it, so he cheerfully replies, of course our pact still stands, doesn't it? He lets out a sigh of relief. At least you're a monster who can understand me. Kim finds it strange. Are you still interested in another monster? Hypanic replies. There was once a monster known as a Saintess Unlike. She was too stupid and unfortunately, the person being insulted suddenly appears right behind his back. How nice to hear that. Princess, what have I done? Hypanic panics, hoping she misheard, but Angela just keeps smiling as if nothing happened. Are you implying there's something wrong with my hearing? Hypanic hurriedly replies, your hearing. How could there be anything wrong with it? Especially that monster-like hearing of yours. Her smile gradually loses all humanity. Is this an insult to saints like us? He begins to mock her words. Misinterpreting a personal insult as an attack on a whole group is a common disease among the high-ranking crowd. I'm just using those people as teachers. To maintain clear judgment, that is. Angela doesn't back down and immediately retorts, most people who are mentally ill think they are normal. You should visit the temple, there are plenty of healing spells for that. One after another they bicker. With so many patients in the temple, it's only natural that healing methods have developed. The whole room suddenly shakes as if there were an earthquake. It turns out to be Angela's fist slamming into Hypanic's chair, which makes him genuinely terrified. She is furious, demanding to go outside to prepare his funeral, while Hypanic thinks that funeral is for her. Kim tiredly pulls his armor hood up, quiet. He suddenly roars, making the people in the pub jump in fright. You see nothing, you hear nothing. In his hand, he holds a handful of gold and tosses it into the air. The crowd immediately scrambles to grab the gold, and as Kim walks away, he curses, the pact didn't cover this. Hypanic. That jerk. That girl is a saintess. A knight created from a saint, just like the goddess created the warrior. They use blessings and magic to create saints, but unlike the goddess who can create a warrior in the blink of an eye, it takes them over 15 years and only one saint can be trained at a time. Because the costs involved are astronomical, a completed saint shows what a perfect battle looks like. Blessed metallic bones, magic, and rock-solid muscles. Even superhuman abilities. Damn it, I was the first one after all. Hypanic clenches his fist tightly. When he was 6, he discovered her talent and wanted to turn her into an SS class, but the priest found her first and took her to the church. But he is scared looking at Angela in front of him, not knowing if he can even defeat his opponent. Kim leaves the pub to find the two of them, and while walking, he hears the sound of clashing steel, ringing out from somewhere. Kim leisurely approaches and stands still observing for a few seconds before asking, "Are you done fighting yet?" Hypanic pants saying, "Not yet." And Angela isn't doing any better. Kim doesn't bother to care, only saying the warrior is coming, so they should end it. Seeing that she knows better, avoids the issue and leaves. He gritted his teeth, seething with frustration. That bastard! Next time I'll... Before I could even finish my sentence, Kim, clearly annoyed, grabbed me. I didn't even have time to react before he had me in a chokehold. Kim glared at me, warning, "I have no problem with you being a protector knight. And I didn't sign up to be a babysitter, so don't dump any more work on me." His eyes held no trace of joking, and with that, Kim turned and walked away. Hypanic was in pain, but he could do nothing but endure it. Don't jump to conclusions when you don't know a thing. Hypanic stood on the street with a few others. Just then, a young warrior with blonde hair approached. He looked remarkably ordinary. He wasn't flying, nor was he riding a white unicorn, by all appearances. He looked just like a knight in plain clothes. As he approached, he hurriedly greeted everyone, and the warrior made a special point to greet Saint Angela, who was standing behind them. She bowed in return. The warrior placed a hand over his heart, bowed, and turned toward Hypanic. This wasn't their first meeting. The warrior was very glad to see Hypanic was safe. "Hey, Panic," the warrior greeted, "on the way here." There were a few setbacks, but nothing to worry about. The warrior then turned toward Kim. He had met Kim once in the royal palace, but this was the first time, formally introducing himself to Kim. The two shook hands warmly. Kim didn't forget to state his name, though he noticed Hypanic's scowl behind them. He really couldn't understand this guy. Was he a 2-year-old? Why act so childishly? Unlike Hypanic, the warrior understood the current situation clearly. The saint had not yet regained her holy power, and that meant the Demon King would be stronger than ever. The warrior knew he couldn't perfectly protect everyone during the fight, yet he still wanted to ask if everyone was ready to join him on this journey. Despite the danger, everyone chose to stand together. Suddenly, the warrior asked for Kim's opinion. Surely he would agree, as he was the prince's guardian knight. The warrior drove his sword deep into the ground and shouted loudly right at that moment, "I hereby declare this formation of the Demon King Subjugation Squad." But then, from the high platform behind them, a dark shadow and a provocative voice rang out, "I've been waiting to hear those words." Half of Francis's face was veiled in shadow. He grinned, revealing sharp, jagged teeth. Upon hearing the voice, the warrior spun around. He hadn't expected a demon to appear right in the middle of the street. Francis stood arrogantly on the bell tower, mocking the humans for daring to declare war on demons on demonic territory. He spread his arms wide, his voice booming down like a death knell. What comes next is nothing but war. That sound, that statement, sliced through their eardrums like a blade, leaving the townspeople unable to bear it. The warrior was significantly affected too, but he didn't pay it any mind. Because in the warrior's eyes right now, there was only the demon harming innocent people. Francis, the proud demon lord, showed clear contempt. From the start, he had said this was no place for humans. This village was demonic territory. Only then did the crowd realize with horror that they were completely surrounded by beasts, thousands of them. It seemed those villagers weren't even human anymore. They were demons transformed by those who had sworn loyalty to the Demon King. The situation was hanging by a thread. They stood back to back, each guarding a side. The warrior felt even more hatred for Francis now. He wanted nothing more than to tear him into 1,000 pieces. Kim and his teammates had to face the werewolves, a low-level demon that multiplies rapidly by corrupting humans. Once a human becomes a werewolf, they can never return to their original form. They only become puppets for the demons to control. Francis watched from above, confident that those werewolves would surely be able to take this group down. Still, he had another plan ready. The first target was Hypanic. In a moment of danger, Hypanic flipped backward and delivered a finishing blow to his opponent. Hypanic possessed the power of light. He utilized it to the maximum, even using his shield as a weapon. Francis meticulously recorded every move. Next, he ordered the werewolves to attack the Saint Angela. Though she hadn't regained her full power, she still had an arsenal of support magic. A werewolf took advantage of her distraction and lunged from behind, mouth agape. But Angela wasn't afraid. With just one punch, she made the enemy shut its trap. Just when they thought it was small fry, the werewolf was sent to meet its maker by Angela's hand. Literally and figuratively. The interface and operating system of this saint were truly worlds apart. After the saint, the next target was the warrior. The moment an opponent lunged, the warrior swung his sword in a clean strike, sending it straight to the afterlife. His fighting style was incredibly traditional. Fearing it might not be dead, he followed up with another loving strike. Behind the warrior, the sound of a werewolf came again. This time, it was a werewolf wearing a little girl's clothes. The warrior's blood boiled. He didn't want to believe what he was thinking, looking at the innocent people. Transformed by the werewolf curse, he didn't know what to do. But even if he didn't want to, he had to act because they could never be human again. Francis, finishing his notes, felt extremely satisfied. Suddenly, a chill ran down his spine. Francis counted again and again, noticing one person missing, and this person was about to send him to his grave, boasting the title of one of the 7 demon generals, yet when death was imminent. He hadn't realized the danger. Less than a second later, Francis broke into a cold sweat as he realized Kim had circled behind him. He hadn't expected to leave himself so exposed, that Kim could sneak up on him so easily. He refused to believe the reality before him, for he was one of the 7 demon kings, a being who could not be defeated. But Kim had absolutely no intention of showing mercy. A stream of red liquid, hot and fresh, immediately erupted into the air. The liquid splattered onto Kim's armor. This news quickly spread to the lair of the 7 demon generals. All that can be said is that Francis was too confident and underestimated his opponent, resulting in a lapse that cost him his life, even if his death was anything but glorious. But at the very least, the 6 remaining demon generals also understood that the one about to descend upon them was definitely no ordinary pushover, or so it was said. However, those other demon generals, They didn't seem to take that lesson to heart at all. Each of them was so arrogant, assuming that Francis's downfall was simply because he was too weak, and that the title of 7 demon generals was just a hollow shell. Deep down, they believed in the 4 great lords. They were certain that humans could never defeat them because the one about to arrive was just a hero constrained by the goddess's shackles. As for them, they had long since surpassed those limits. Blood dripped down from the bell tower while the bodies of werewolves lay scattered everywhere on the ground. After taking down Francis, Kim immediately jumped down from above and tossed him to the dirt, leaving him completely incapable of resisting. The warrior also sheathed his sword since the werewolves below had already been thoroughly dealt with. Hippanic cast healing magic, but he didn't dare look the Lord of Pride in the face. Once his body was nearly fully recovered, the warrior felt extremely surprised. He looked at the figure lying motionless on the ground. This was Francis, one of the 7 demon generals. Even though it was his first time seeing him in person, it wasn't hard to recognize him once he knew it was one of the 7. Hippanic couldn't help but wonder. Francis was the one in charge of intelligence. His authority certainly couldn't be that low, yet he had only brought a bunch of weak werewolves with him. Was it pure recklessness, or was there some other reason Hippanic couldn't figure it out? Perhaps the demons didn't need this guy anymore, or maybe the real enemy was someone else entirely. While everyone was clearing the battlefield, Kim walked over to the corpse of a werewolf. That werewolf had been finished off with a single clean strike to the throat. These guys were just low-level monsters. Previously, after eating a lizard man, his compatibility with amphibians had increased. So if he ate a werewolf, would his compatibility with beasts increase as well? At this moment, Kim couldn't wait any longer. He genuinely wanted to know the result after finishing off this whole bunch, over on the other side. Hippanic seemed to still be lost in his own train of thought. His gaze was glued to Francis's corpse. Suddenly, Kim, his face still splattered with a bit of blood, walked up and asked if Hippanic intended to eat that guy. Hippanic was a bit startled, but quickly composed himself. He reminded Kim to watch his language because they weren't the only 2 people there. Then he pointed toward the Lord of Pride. He said that this was one of the 7 demon generals, the one in charge of managing information. For someone like that to die so easily, Hippanic thought that perhaps the Demon King didn't need him anymore. So they took this opportunity to leave him to fend for himself. But regardless of how you put it in any place, information is always incredibly important. If the demons dared to discard even their intelligence chief, it proved that their society was no longer what it used to be. Hippanic fell into deep thought. Kim and he both shared the same conclusion: someone in a high position was no longer of any use. Naturally, that meant that society had undergone a change. The only thing he couldn't know was what that change was. Kim suddenly spoke up. Maybe it's a third party. This remark immediately threw Hippanic's mind into chaos. Kim continued by pointing toward the 2 princes, as the first party then pointed at himself as the second. Hippanic's blue pupils contracted. He didn't expect someone from Earth could say something like that, though he didn't want to admit it that matter had actually occurred. He glanced over at the warrior and the saintess. The 2 of them were still busy cleaning up. He only hoped they didn't hear what he was about to say. Returning to the situation in the Demon Kingdom, if a third party truly existed, it might not necessarily be a bad thing. Hippanic smiled if that hypothesis were true. Then it would be an opportunity to deal with the warrior and the saintess. After finishing the cleanup, everyone dug a deep pit and piled the werewolf bodies inside. The warrior shoveled the dirt down. Earth and stone piled up, burying everything, including the useful information they had just obtained today. Once done, they even erected a large stone in the shape of a cross. The saintess knelt before that stone to pray for the werewolves to reach the Lord. Even if their bodies had been tainted, their souls remained intact. A moment later, everyone left the neighborhood and headed toward the carriages. Hippanic felt lucky that at least they still had carts to use. The saintess was a bit hesitant. Sure, there were carts, but who would hold the reins? There was no other choice. The driver could only be Hippanic. Kim only knew how to operate motorized vehicles, so he chose to sit on the roof of the carriage. The warrior's principles forbade him from driving anything, and the saintess didn't know how to drive a carriage, so the 2 of them had to sit inside. Kim mocked Hippanic, saying that even though he was a prince, he still had to drive for commoners. He just gave a strained smile. To him, driving the carriage wasn't much different from playing Dragon Quest. Kim didn't understand what Hippanic had just mentioned, so he was a bit curious. Hispanic was surprised, and then teased Kim for not knowing how to enjoy life. No sooner had he finished speaking than Kim immediately retorted that if someone said he didn't know how to enjoy life just because of things like that, then he'd rather just self-destruct. Seeing Kim teach him a lesson, Hispanic showed annoyance. Kim took off his helmet. At this moment, he realized Hispanic was speaking to him in Russian. Clearly he had something that he didn't want the two people inside the carriage to hear. Hispanic didn't bother hiding it. He said he knew how to deal with the warrior. Kim was quite stunned and immediately wanted to know exactly what that method was. As someone who had experimented on many creatures, Kim understood clearly that dealing with a warrior wasn't simple at all, even if one had the capability. From the first time he saw the warrior at the village, he had felt that something was off. Just by looking at how the warrior acted decisively without needing to use skills, just by wielding a sword purely, he could take out a bunch of werewolves. It was clear he was extremely strong. For a person with many specialized abilities for different things like Kim, the warrior was truly a formidable opponent. However, Hippanic's two words, possible to, pulled Kim out of that thought. The warrior's qualities were reserved only for the most honest, upright, and kind-hearted people. But if one lost those qualities, then they would have to suffer a penalty, a level of punishment that even Kim could take on. Kim couldn't help but ask Hispanic if he had a concrete plan yet. Obviously, he hadn't come up with any ideas yet. He just wanted things to happen naturally, but while the two of them were talking, the Saintess suddenly interrupted. Since they were speaking Russian, she couldn't understand them, and Hispanic angrily scolded her. Cutting in while they were communicating through hand signals, Angela gave a bitter smile and accused him of disrespecting the servant of the goddess. The two of them started bickering again. Kim, sitting on the roof of the carriage, could only feel helpless at their childish behavior. He even asked to switch seats. A while later, the warrior seemed surprised to see Kim walk inside. Inside the carriage, he sat opposite the warrior, and as it happened, the warrior had a few things he wanted to ask him. Kim didn't look surprised at all. It seemed he had partially guessed this would happen. The warrior looked straight into Kim's eyes. He wanted to know why. Kim had become the prince's bodyguard, but before answering, Kim wanted to know why the warrior was asking. The warrior's brow furrowed slightly as he said he just wanted to understand his younger brother's friend better. But right after that, the warrior's chest suddenly twinged because he had violated the warrior's rule against being biased. Kim easily recognized the stabbing pain. He knew for sure this was the principle that Hispanic had mentioned. Looking at the warrior's pained expression, Kim said that he wouldn't be hurting if he hadn't asked that question. But the warrior didn't think so. To him, even if he had to suffer the pain, that question was completely worth it. The situation before them was truly ridiculous. One person was worried about his younger brother, while the other was doing his best to destroy the older brother. Kim almost laughed out loud. He quickly regained his composure and said that the relationship between him and the prince was based solely on a contract. He would protect the prince, and the prince would fulfill what he desired. Hearing this, the warrior was extremely surprised, because from the beginning, he had thought the two of them were close comrades. But after what Kim said, he realized that Kim was also aiming for a reward from conquering the Demon King. Until this moment was the first time Kim had heard the word reward. He really wanted to know what it was. Before long, the group reached the city of Asopolis, a fortress located on the edge of the Gankanton Kingdom. This place was only a few kilometers from the Demon Kingdom. After the long journey, the group decided to stop at a tavern. The warrior suggested that everyone stay there for the night. After that, he asked for permission to go around to see if anyone needed help. The Saintess also asked for permission to go to the temple to report that she was safe, and at the same time she hoped Kim would keep an eye on the prince and not let him do anything foolish. Once said, both the warrior and the Saintess left. Only Kim and Hispanic remained. When there was no one else around, Kim told Hispanic about the reward after conquering the Demon King. Hispanic was just as stunned as Kim had been earlier, because this was also the first time he had heard about the reward from the warrior. Kim learned that the warrior had received the goddess's blessing because she hoped the warrior would conquer the Demon King. If the warrior succeeded, the goddess would grant a wish to everyone who participated. Hispanic slammed his beer mug onto the table. Was it really like that? Kim confirmed for sure that it couldn't be wrong because he had heard it with his own ears. In the blink of an eye, Hispanic became extremely excited. He didn't expect this mission had such a generous reward. Hispanic lifted his beer mug and downed it in one gulp. After drinking, he felt incredibly refreshed. Then he laughed loudly, saying he was already drunk. Hispanic and Kim sat in the tavern, both eating dinner and drinking beer. By the third mug of beer, Hispanic suddenly felt nauseous and his whole body felt uncomfortable. Kim realized that the food and beer here were unusual, so he was extremely confused, but Hispanic thought it was just because he had drunk too much that he ended up like that. Meanwhile, Hispanic collapsed onto the table and vomited violently. The people around them also showed similar symptoms. Hispanic then gradually fell into an unconscious state. It was very likely that everyone's food had been poisoned. Hispanic's face transformed, veins popped out, and his eyes looked fierce and extremely terrifying. Outside on the street, the warrior was carrying a heavy crate on his shoulder to help a man passing by. When he arrived, the man bowed his head to thank him very respectfully. He wondered how he could repay the warrior appropriately. The warrior just smiled happily, saying he was only doing what he should do. The man kept bowing his mouth, continuously praising the warrior, saying he was truly a great warrior, just like the rumors. But right after that, his face suddenly bulged with veins, just like Hispanic's back at the tavern, and then he opened his mouth to curse the warrior as a damn moron. The warrior was extremely stunned and quickly pulled out his weapon from behind his back, angrily asking the man in front of him who on earth he was to utter such words. The man's eyes rolled back, and his smile became grotesque. He said to the warrior that there was no need to be so surprised because he and his accomplices already knew everything about him. The warrior became even more confused. This guy had just mentioned accomplices. So who else were his accomplices? Just then, voices arose from behind. A group of people was approaching. The warrior immediately sensed danger closing in. Coming from all four directions, he raised his sword to defend himself. The one behind all of this was the Lord of Gluttony, Paris. Many people had already become his victims. The warrior immediately realized that those people were all being manipulated by a puppet spell. Paris spoke up, praising the warrior for discovering it so quickly. He had planted parasites into the entire water supply around the residential area. When entering the body, the parasites would grow inside and then control the consciousness of those who drank the contaminated water. Those victims were completely unable to resist Paris's commands. Paris controlled the innocent people. But if the warrior wanted to get close to him, he would be forced to kill them. Once he did that, the warrior would personally break the rule of not harming innocent people. Indeed, Paris had calculated very viciously. He pushed the warrior into a dilemma where both options were difficult. The warrior never expected this guy to know his principles so well. He immediately realized he needed a better vantage point and scrambled onto the roof. It was probably the best move in this situation. The warrior looked up at the rooftop and discovered the Saintess Hispanic and Kim were up there. Both the Saintess and Hispanic had been hit by the puppet spell. Hispanic mocked the warrior, saying he wouldn't be able to escape them if he kept ignoring them. If he persisted, he would face the consequences. As soon as Hispanic finished speaking, he raised his hand to strike the warrior down, but at that very moment, Kim, standing right beside him, immediately intervened. He struck Hispanic's arm hard, leaving the warrior completely baffled as to why Kim would hurt Hispanic. He should have been protecting him since Hispanic was being controlled. So he still tried to attack the warrior again, but Kim quickly knocked Hispanic down. The parasite was stunned, thinking Kim had also been controlled, but that wasn't the case at all. After Hispanic, it was the Saintess's turn to be neutralized by Kim. She collapsed at his feet, and Kim grabbed Hispanic, and the Saintess jumped off the roof and tossed them to either side. That was the only way to keep them from self-destructing. Kim told the warrior to keep an eye on Hispanic and the Saintess, saying he would handle the rest, and the crowd slowly closed in on him. Even though he was lucky enough not to be infected by the parasites, he was still a knight who had to follow the code of not harming innocent people, but Kim completely turned a deaf ear to those words. He struck with cold precision. The warrior shouted that these civilians were innocent, and the others joined in, saying they were just being controlled. Kim had already injured a civilian, which was wrong, but he didn't slow down. He insisted that if everyone was under a spell, it was actually to his advantage. No one would remember even if he killed them. Kim decided to use his dwarf muscle strength with a destructive force so powerful it shook the earth. Bazaar was terrified, realizing Kim was truly a madman. How could a knight be so ruthless as to slaughter innocent people? Kim coldly retorted that Paris was spewing disgusting, hypocritical lies and that he was the one who had started it all. Realizing the situation was turning against him, Paris hurriedly begged for mercy. He promised to retreat and return to the Demon Kingdom, pleading for Kim to stop, but Kim was determined to drag him out. Paris attacked him while keeping an eye on his position, and the closer he got to Bazaar, the more people blocked Kim's path. Finally, Kim spotted Bazaar standing on the high city wall. Realizing he had been found out, Bazaar scrambled to run, but he was a step too late. Kim quickly caught him. Bazaar panicked and kept begging Kim not to come any closer. Yet Kim seemed extremely interested in Bazaar. He needed him because he was an abnormal creature. All the skills Bazaar possessed were unlike anything Kim had, which was just too interesting. Kim stuck his tongue out. Bazaar was going to be a delicious meal for him. Paris couldn't believe things had turned out this way. He had released the parasites into the water, and no creature could survive without water. Even if Kim wasn't infected, Paris had successfully controlled his allies. He had thought he held a 9/10 chance of winning. Yet Kim dared to hurt his allies and even slaughtered his own kind without a moment's hesitation. Did Kim truly have no emotions? Bazaar decided that since it had come to this, he would use the highest concentration of control to crush Kim's resistance. Calculating his move, the Lord of Gluttony dove straight at Kim, landing right on his face. 3 eyes locked, and he slowly crawled into his mouth. Without a moment's hesitation, the Lord of Gluttony Bazaar was incredibly smug about his idiotic plan to engage in person and become a parasite inside Kim's body. Aiming to control him from within, he couldn't have guessed that Kim possessed a digestive system that feared nothing on Earth before he could even present his suicide plan. Thinking he was clever but actually being stupid to the extreme, the digestive juices in Kim's body quickly turned him into dust. Kim was still surprised. By the Lord of Gluttony's act of throwing himself into the void, the action was so fast and so dangerous that he hadn't even had time to fully taste the flavor in his mouth before it was nearly digested. It was certainly because it was so soft. Out of all the parasites he had ever tasted on Earth, this one was perhaps the most unique. It could control humans, so he had absorbed a new skill from it. Kim couldn't hide his excitement and immediately wanted to test it, bringing his finger to his mouth. He bit down hard, severing his fingertip, then spat it onto the ground. The wound healed instantly thanks to his giant regeneration skill, while that other finger immediately transformed into a fish. Kim realized he could detach and control parts of his own body, though it was still limited by size and duration. But if he ate a composite organism, it would be different. He could take that skill much further. The battle ended, and below the citizens began to wake up, looking at each other in confusion, not understanding what had just happened, and bewildered as to whether everything had truly ended or not. At that moment in this demon castle, they couldn't believe Gluttony was dead. The news threw the demons into a panic that Old Worm had actually died. Was he truly unable to survive? But reality hit them hard. The one called Gluttony had indeed been sent to his ancestors, and all his experiments and parasite samples were completely wiped out. Gluttony was considered a tough nut to crack because beyond his old values he was truly suitable to be one of the 4 heavenly kings. Thus the death of the Lord of Gluttony made the demon horde particularly concerned. A purple demon with newly sprouted horns couldn't help but ask how he actually died. Another long-horned demon explained to him. A madman had slaughtered the people under his control, tracked down his location, and killed him. It was that damn knight who came with the prince. A red-haired female demon, also horned worriedly, said that with Gluttony dead, besides the 4 heavenly kings, they only had Wrath left. But that long-horned demon was still confident that Kim was no match for Wrath. That demon specialized in dealing with large numbers, so using him to deal with the human coalition force would be more effective. After speaking, he turned his head to find Wrath, then suddenly noticed the main character of their conversation standing right there. It disappeared a while ago. The purple demon with those freshly sprouted horns coughed and said the guy had bolted the second he heard the name of that old worm. That action caused the demons around the table to fall dead silent. The hero chosen by the goddess recalled what Kim had just done, and realized that in that situation Kim's method was definitely the most effective, even if it was brutal. Facing the innocent people being controlled, he couldn't stop the chaotic thoughts in his head and hesitantly asked Kim. He asked if Kim could have saved more people using his skills, but Kim understood he was being accused of cruelty for killing the puppets, the innocent civilians. "What are you talking about? The enemy is the one controlling and killing them." His gaze was cold and emotionless as he replied. The hero couldn't believe it. A knight like that serving as the prince's guard. He suddenly felt that Kim was no different from those demons, possessing a twisted mindset that truly terrified him. Just then, who knows what the hell happened, but the prince suddenly stopped. The carriage panicked and stammering, drawing his attention. Before the 2 young men, a mountain suddenly appeared, obnoxiously blocking their path. It turned out to be a demon carrying a spiked mountain on its back, introducing himself as the Lord of Wrath Decast. He had come to avenge his longtime comrade, the gluttonous Lord Pegasus, while glaring at the team ahead with eyes that looked like they were overflowing with fresh blood. He stomped his massive foot, scaring the two cowards half to death. The prince couldn't help but stare, trembling like a leaf when he heard the name Lord of Wrath Decast. Seeing that reaction, Kim was certain the prince knew exactly who this was. The prince explained to Kim that he had never met him in person but had read about him. Over 55 years ago, a giant monster attacked them. On its back were demon warriors. They say its body was even larger than a dragon's. Kim was surprised because if it was twice the size of a dragon, it would have to be 30 meters tall. But it seemed this one was even bigger than that. That made sense, as it had probably kept growing over the last 55 years, and reptiles usually grow continuously. The prince replied while thinking, leaving Kim feeling overwhelmed. It's already the size of a mountain, and yet in the future, how much bigger could it possibly get? Before his mind could even process the knowledge about this type of demon, a tail like a giant spiked mace was already swinging toward them. The situation made the saintess lose her patience with their slow conversation, as if they were just exchanging trivia. The most important thing right now is finding a way to deal with that monster. Before she could even finish her sentence, something tore up the grass to their right and lunged at them. It was the demon's tail. Its massive body was incredibly agile, spinning around to build momentum for the mace tail aimed directly at their carriage. It was too fast, too dangerous, and nobody could react in time. They could only sit there waiting for the impact with looks of sheer panic. In a flash, the carriage was shattered, leaving nothing intact. The demon tail had destroyed it all. After the powerful strike from the Lord of Wrath, the mace tail slowly retracted. Suddenly, an explosion erupted from the ground, and the 4 members of the expedition team crawled out from underneath. They were still alive and struggling to get out. Decast roared fiercely, "You pests! You're the ones who killed my comrade, right?" Before any of the tiny worms could answer, the Lord of Wrath didn't care to listen to any explanations. He didn't care who really did it. Whoever he saw, he would wipe out. Sooner or later, he would have his revenge. After saying that, Decast launched a second attack, sending the expedition team running for their lives. The saintess suddenly remembered the prince's skill. She hurriedly said, "Prince, you're great at using your shield to defend yourself, right? It's time for you to step up and show us." As for the prince, he was scrambling and running to escape. After hearing those words, he couldn't help but complain, "Are you crazy? How can I stop him even with the best defensive skills? It's impossible. What matters now is staying alive to even use the skills." In this situation, the 2 royals came up with an idea for the hero protected by the goddess to use his skills. However, the suggestion wasn't just bad, it was completely absurd, so it was immediately rejected by the hero. The idea of the saintess taking a hit and then slowly healing herself was insane and impractical. Even if she wanted to heal, she had to stay alive first. Just one hit from that demon would crush her instantly. There would be no chance to recover. The saintess, standing nearby, continued to speak, and the prince angrily retorted that it was only good for its size. But in the end, they couldn't do anything. While they talked, their hands were still clawing the ground to run away. All 3 scrambled in different directions. None of them went the same way, leaving Kim standing alone, staring at the 3 idiots. A moment later, all 3 of the fools suddenly turned their heads back at the same time and stared at Kim. It caught him off guard. He paused and said, "Do I look like someone who can fight that demon?" The 3 clowns didn't say a word, as if they had read the thoughts of those 3 kids. He sighed. Fine. If there's a way." His gaze hardened accordingly. The Lord of Wrath started getting annoyed at having to wait so long, but that frustration wouldn't make him give up this debt halfway. He was determined to settle the score with the team, not just today. It wasn't just the grudge for sending his best friend to the afterlife, but his own personal vendetta against humanity. Even though he was an incredibly powerful demon, in one battle he had been careless and was ambushed, leaving a huge scar on his body. After many battles, he had perfected his combat strategy. First, for myself, I have to use scouting skills to confirm if there are any enemies around. Second, sweep the entire surrounding area so the opponent has nowhere to hide. And third, if the enemy approaches, intercept them, and if they attack from a distance, then a thick hide and defensive skills are more than enough. In this way, I'm confident that I will never lose to anyone, even if the opponent is the hero himself. Meanwhile, the Lord of Wrath was still babbling endlessly about tactics. The essence distilled from his own blood and bone, while the punitive squad had also finished discussing their plan to take him down after hearing Kim's strategy. The Saintess couldn't help but be shocked by a knight's way of thinking, because that method was truly too cunning and not honorable in the slightest. She was just about to object. Then the question, "So do you have a better way?" coming from Kim's mouth left her speechless, unable to offer a single reply. Over there. The hero had silently resolved to fight to the end. Even though he knew there was almost no chance of winning, he still had to charge in because if he ran away, other towns would be in danger. And as a hero serving the Saintess, he did not allow himself to do such a thing, saying that with sword in hand, he lunged straight at the Lord of Wrath. The plan was officially underway, and Kim couldn't just stand by either. He began to prepare for his own transformation process. Until now, the goddess's sword could only unleash its full power when facing evil demons otherwise. Then it was just like an ordinary sword. In his mind, a bit of hesitation began to surface, because the Lord of Wrath's rage stemmed from a desire for revenge. While revenge isn't the right thing to do, it couldn't be considered an act of absolute evil either. Therefore, it was highly likely that the goddess's sword would not be able to unleash its full power, so in this current situation, the hero decided to give his all for this attack. However, Dikas wasn't an easy opponent. Not giving the hero a chance to show what he could do, Dikas attacked first, forcing him into a difficult spot. The warrior secretly thought that to be pushed and attacked like this at this point was truly tough. Before he could even react, Dikas pivoted and swung his tail hard toward the front. One blow came down, sending the warrior flying like a withered onion in a gale, but the warrior wasn't just all talk. He finally managed to hold on after that fatal blow. Even so, he couldn't help but be shocked by the terrifying, destructive power of that move. Is the storm trailing behind this strong? Realizing that just one hit from him had drained his opponent that much, Dikas was extremely smug and mocked. "Is that all you've got? A hero who was already defeated by Pegasus like you isn't reliable at all." He panted and weakly replied, "True, even I don't believe in myself." Seeing that he became even more arrogant with his brute force fighting style. "Huh, you're about to die and you still want to joke around. Or are you begging for your life?" But before Dikas could finish his arrogant remark, the warrior shouted firmly, "This much is enough for the operation plan to succeed perfectly." Returning to the strategy meeting 5 minutes ago, Kim started proposing the plan to go underground to ambush the demon Dekas. The hero would stand in front to attract his attention, and he would approach from underground and aim straight for the scar on the demon's belly, because digging through the ground would still make noise and be easy for him to notice. There must be bait to distract him, and he needed at least 3 minutes and at most 5 minutes to finish. After hearing that plan, the hero immediately agreed without a shred of doubt. That decisiveness caught Kim a bit off guard because he trusted his words without a second of hesitation. He instinctively asked, "Why do you trust me? What if I'm tricking you or lying?" He gave a good-natured smile and replied, "That's impossible because one of the hero's specialized skills is lie detection." Kim secretly chuckled. "Well, it's true I'm not lying, but in this country where that skill doesn't work, I can lie to the only hero present here. Who knows, it might come in handy." Returning to the present as soon as the warrior's words finished, Kim had successfully extended his claws, preparing to give Dekas a few basic blows from underground. The resonance between his superpowered demon muscle body and dragon claws helped him significantly reduce the time needed for his digging plan. A tunnel was quickly created from the team's rally point, stretching straight beneath the scar of that wrathful demon, without revealing any openings. By the time that demon realized it, everything was already too late, even though he was still rambling on about some life detection skill. Our Kim responded with actual action. He said bluntly, "Do I need to answer that question of yours?" The moment he uttered those words, he had closed in at an extremely close distance. His entire arm had transformed into a dragon's arm, so no matter how thick the hide was, dragon claws could still tear it apart. Dikas screamed in desperation, "No! I can't let it keep hurting me like this. There's no way I'm dying at his hands." While it was still raging, Kim used the dagger to stab straight into its scar, punched a hole right through, and dove inside, sending blood spraying everywhere as the creature shrieked in agony. Stepping inside the turtle demon's body, Kim couldn't help but marvel at his brilliant success. But the place was too vast to just wander around and sightsee. So Kim immediately summoned the parasitic gluttonous Pegasus demons to spread throughout the turtle's body, and in no time they were sending back reports from every part, like the heart, the lungs, blood vessels, and the brain. These parasitic monster skills are incredibly convenient. Kim mused. But among the information streaming in, one strange thing caught him off guard. It says this is its friend. After a moment of thought, Kim realized what was going on and let out an amused laugh. Dying to your own friend's skill, talk about a true brotherhood. Suddenly, a signal even stronger than the rest grabbed Kim's attention. It was coming from the abdomen, so Kim stepped forward, swung his dragon claw, and started digging through the layers of flesh. It was absolutely disgusting, and he couldn't hide his look of revulsion. But after enduring the foul, fishy stench of the monster, Kim dug a large hole and discovered that what lay inside was like a feast. A delicious buffet. Kim looked at them with hungry eyes, thrilled that he finally had the chance to use his overpowered gluttony skill again. Outside, the turtle monster kept screaming in pain, sweat pouring off it like a waterfall. Tears and snot streaming down its face as it begged incessantly, my stomach is burning up. I was wrong. What do I do? Please spare me. The three of them watched the monster completely stunned and unable to believe what was happening before their eyes. The saintess standing nearby even squeezed her eyes shut. She couldn't bear to watch, and the two princes also began to waver as they saw the monster's eyes roll back and its head, tears pouring out endlessly. Even without a final dying word, he fell with a clear conscience, knowing he gave his all for humanity. The Lord of Wrath Dacus has officially logged out of this server. Its body crashed down, triggering an earthquake that shook the surroundings before it went completely lifeless. Suddenly, its eye began darting around before exploding, and out jumped Kim, looking incredibly cool. Yet there was something terrifying about him, too. Covered head to toe in blood, he left his three companions speechless. The subjugation party set off once more. But this time, they had to use a makeshift carriage because the original one was smashed to pieces. Another change was, the atmosphere turned incredibly tense. The warrior and the nun kept glancing at Kim with looks that were far from friendly. Even he noticed this strange behavior. So he instinctively asked the prince beside him, the vibe is a bit weird today, isn't it? Did something happen? The prince looked shaky as he replied, well, you just look really terrifying right now. I didn't really pay attention, but still, even though he said that, his expression gave it all away. As for Kim, he was still oblivious, completely unable to see what the problem was. In his mind, that sort of thing wasn't important anyway. It didn't have much to do with him. The most important thing was still what he had managed to consume. Although what he ate this time wasn't as valuable as a giant dinosaur, it was still muscle mass of similar size, and the goblin's muscles were even stronger. As for the skin, when he combined it with the dragon skin, he managed to make his own skin even thicker and tougher. Nothing went to waste. In fact, he gained even more than he had imagined. First, the giant dinosaur's lungs. They had become a powerful mass of muscle because to sustain such a massive body, it required a tremendous amount of oxygen. And the deeper it inhaled, the more powerful its exhale. These lungs would make his dragon breath even more devastating. Second, the circulatory system. The larger the body, the harder the heart has to work to pump blood throughout the body. The arteries and veins were densely distributed around the organs like the heart, with relatively even spacing. So now even if his heart were destroyed, blood could still circulate. And the greatest trophy of all was the thing he had spent the whole time digging for. Thanks to eating it, he could now fly. Kim wore a satisfied smile. The scene shifted to the demon castle. Around the conference table sat the same demons, only one chair was now empty as the Lord of Wrath had left the game, gone to dust. Julius, the demon of lust, could not hide his anger that only 3 of the 4 heavenly kings remained. Bassanio gave a cold, faint smile and replied, that is the final outcome. Indeed. The voice of the demon Julius rang out, continuing the thought. His eyes were now filled with a sinister smile, for everything was going exactly according to the Demon King's plan. Closing the chapter on the past, the demons began discussing their future plans. Clearly, the heroes were about to attack the Demon King's castle, having already laid waste to the villages beforehand. So they had to nip this in the bud before the heroes could cause further losses. Their meager efforts were enough to deal with the ruins of the ancient era, and the heroes would foolishly believe they had already wiped out the core forces of the Demon King. That would bring them no small benefit. Now that the deal was done, it was humanity's turn to head down the path of destruction. This would be a predestined, difficult war. In that battle, humanity only needed to cut off the Demon King's head to win. But if the opposite happened, the demon race must cause humanity to be destroyed or force them to their knees in surrender. Their greatest obstacle was the hero because as long as the hero lived, humanity would never yield. Not only that, the heroes were the strongest individuals under the goddess's protection. Ultimately, to seize victory, the demon race had only one path to annihilate all of humanity. If that were the case, then rather than letting the hero fail by the demon king's hand, they might as well bring about the destruction of humanity sooner. Julius, the demon of lust, recounted the demon king's words in an extremely sinister and venomous tone. Suddenly, he and his subordinates stood up in unison, bowed their hands, and shouted, "Absolute loyalty to our emperor, absolute respect to our emperor from another world." In the distance, at the highest position, a figure was present that looked completely different from the demons. But because it was too blurry, his features couldn't be clearly seen. But could Kim and the prince's guess be correct that there was a third person who also came from the human world? Existing here, the group followed the path the beast had taken earlier. With just a glance, Kim vaguely realized that it had been running around in a panic. Suddenly, they were surrounded by a pack of monsters. They held weapons in their hands, revealing their disdain. Realizing they were surrounded, they immediately huddled together. The warrior knew at a glance that these were the Demon King's soldiers. At the same time, two of them lunged straight at Kim, determined to take his life. The demon's iron mace swung toward Kim's head. He didn't even bother to dodge the blow. Instead, he stood his ground and casually swung his sword, neatly finishing off the two monsters. Behind his back, his other companions were fiercely engaging the swarm of monsters. The demon from earlier let out a soft groan. Of the whole castle, only this one section remained intact. Through a gap in the demon's iron helmet, Kim seemed to spot something noteworthy. A scroll fell from the folds of his garment, resting neatly in front of Kim's chest. He picked it up and opened it. After clearing out the demons, the group gathered in a safe place to look at the scroll. Kim realized this was a map of the Demon King's kingdom. The warrior stroked his chin, looking at the map, silently admiring the demon race's surveying capabilities. Hibanik pointed a wooden stick at the map. "There is one more important thing. Everyone look here. All the demon soldiers' march routes lead toward the main boulevard and converge at one point. But this white dot here has a path that cuts straight through every battlefield. The saint thinks this map is being used to coordinate some kind of supply line." The warrior immediately jumps up now that he has the map in hand. "Let's hurry up and go take down the Demon King." But he is quickly stopped by Hibanik. Hibanik frowns deep in thought and points to a highly suspicious spot, a village nestled in the mountains that seems to have no strategic value whatsoever. It connects directly to the main route and is the final point of the path, the saint asks. "Is that the Demon King's vital supply camp?" Hibanik suggests they go check it out, while the warrior's gut tells him this place must be incredibly important. Then the warrior speaks up. "If this place is key, maybe we can cut off the Demon King's offensive." After a week, they finally reach that mysterious village. Hibanik steps forward, observing the thick black columns of smoke rising into the air. "This is the place." Hibanik says, standing on the cliff looking down, that this village doesn't have many residents, or at least life here isn't bustling. Everyone is just intensely focused on doing something. Following the direction of the smoke columns, they see women assembling weapons, children shoveling coal into furnaces, and sturdy men constantly hauling raw materials into the village. Just as Hibanik predicted, they are producing weapons. When the warrior sees how the demon forces live here, the enthusiasm he felt before suddenly vanishes, and his face reveals a look of bewilderment. Hibanik draws his sword. Why hesitate? After all, we came to this village to achieve our goal, which is to wipe this place out. The warrior angrily grabs Hibanik's shoulder to stop him, asking if he intends to slaughter innocent people. Hibanik turns his head. There is no such thing as an innocent person here. The warrior doesn't understand what he means at first, so Hibanik explains that everyone in the village is involved in the production of weapons, so they are all weapons manufacturers. The warrior yells furiously, "What are you thinking?" The warrior's wound suddenly flares up, making him pale, and he collapses. Hibanik doesn't care at all and continues, "Have you forgotten the hero's code? I'll only ask you two things." Hibanik looks back at the warrior, who is kneeling on the ground. "Is killing these villagers a bad thing?" The warrior looks up and answers softly, "Taking a life is never a good thing." Hibanik asks again, "Then is infiltrating the enemy's rear to destroy their weapons and kill their smiths the right thing to do?" The warrior immediately affirms that it is because cutting off the enemy's supply line is the only way to reduce our casualties on the battlefield. Only then does he wake up to reality. A hero must always do what is right and honorable. Kim can't wait any longer and steps forward saying arguing is just a waste of time. He wants to go ahead. The warrior watches his teammates continue to move forward, his heart still in turmoil. Is killing the people here ultimately right or wrong? He truly doesn't know what to do. A moment later, blood splatters onto Kim's iron helmet. He asks, "Is that the last one?" Kim tiredly takes off his helmet. "Just leave this to me." He turns back to look at the warrior, saying he will deal with the enemy civilians. The saint is devastated witnessing the death of young demonkin. Hippanic is busy comforting the saint. He thinks this squad is full of useless people. Hippanic walks over and picks up a gun lying on the ground, carefully holding it up to inspect it. Are they really making these weapons? Hippanic closely observes the 7.92mm Mauser ammunition and sighs, "Who on earth is evil enough to do this?" Hippanic calls out to Kim asking, "What's the meaning of this?" Kim wipes the blood off his face and replies, "It means the Demon King has already moved to Phase 3. Hippanic gives a cunning smile. "Exactly." The warrior, confused, asks, "You already knew about this?" Hippanic explains his deduction, believing the Demon King's kingdom has dragged civilians into the war. Hippanic explains that they only need to give the civilians basic instructions on how to use a gun, and they meet the requirements to become soldiers. Surely this is how the Demon King has enticed the populace to fight, by creating this type of weapon. The warrior clenches his fist in fury, unable to believe his ears. He turns away in anger, stepping heavily toward the village. Hippanic doesn't forget to acknowledge Kim's hard work. Hippanic suddenly hands him a map, saying Kim deserves a vacation. Kim opens the map. The combat zone has already been marked out by Hippanic. Hippanic tells him to go enjoy himself. Kim smirks. This is work, not a vacation, but it's not bad. It makes it easier to conduct surprise inspections from the back of the village. A roar from the warrior echoes out. Hippanic smiles diabolically. Everything has gone according to plan. Near the edge of the forest, violent sounds make the ground shake. They ring out continuously, along with screams of pain. The warrior cries while pounding his fists into the ground. He is miserable, not knowing what to do. At the port city of Starfish in the Demon King's realm, the young boy Maiden, a half-human, half-demon hybrid, is struggling to carry heavy crates. Maiden is quite small, so his speed and strength are inferior to those around him, and people keep pushing him to hurry up. Even though he is exhausted, the employer tosses a bag of coins onto the table as his reward for moving 20 sacks of gunpowder and 10 crates of coal. Maiden bows gratefully, thanking him. He holds the coin purse, calculating how he can use this money to eat with Mizon, pay the rent, and buy a few necessities. Then he calculates what's left. Just having received his pay, he's down to his last coin. Maiden is sad. He sighs, just trying to live one day at a time. Hey, when is this ever going to end? But then he just laughs it off. No matter how exhausted he is, he has to keep going for little Mizon, who innocently calls out from behind, "This tastes weird. Try some Big Brother." Maiden smiles and lies, telling her he already ate plenty on the way back, then tells the little one to just eat his share too. Mizon beams at that. In the blink of an eye, Maiden is back at the harbor working. He suddenly feels the sacks are much lighter than yesterday. That must mean he's getting stronger. Maiden excitedly thinks to himself, for now he's just a harbor loader, but one day he'll become a member of the Demon King's 7th Army. Maiden is full of hope for the future. When that time comes, his name will be famous everywhere. On Kim's side, the accessory brain is an organ hypothesized to exist in dinosaurs to transmit nerve impulses throughout an oversized body. It takes a long time, so to support the movement of the lower body. Some scholars suggest they possess a secondary brain at the waist. The accessory brain is that supporting part. And by digging into the bodies of the casts from the trunk, Kim was able to find an accessory brain in a distracted dinosaur, and in order to replicate the brains of other creatures, they must replicate their nervous systems. The parts of the body that only that creature has, which can be used immediately without needing practice. Kim silently ponders. But Kim still had a problem. He had never used a brain like that before, because a brain is something that could put the master's body in danger. Yet he thinks further. If he can use it, there's no need to worry about the danger it brings, and he could even use the brains of other creatures. In other words, Kim began to transform his body. Large wings burst out. He can fly now. Thinking is doing. In his dragon form, Kim immediately flaps his wings and soars above Starfish City. Kim observes and realizes that except for his brain, his entire body can transform. Moreover, the slime-covered skin of the lizard man is completely compatible with dragon skin, and that slime can be replaced by a mysterious substance. Kim knows the effects of that slime very well. It will make a dinosaur's lungs and blood vessels stronger, while the bone marrow and blood possess the regenerative powers of a dwarf demon, and the muscles are as taut and powerful as an orc's. He tells himself he is about to become the strongest creature alive. Kim lets out a roar that makes the earth tremble. His massive, ferocious form streaks across the sky of the port city. Little Maiden looks up in terror. Behind the bugs, Kim rained down flames to detonate the gunpowder waiting to be shipped by their boats. Maiden barely managed to look up before discovering a dragon right above his head. A series of weapon transport ships immediately explode. Maiden looks back in horror at the ships. He stands frozen as all that remains is a sea of fire while the people around him start to flee in chaos. There's a dragon run. A panicked merman doesn't even dare to believe the scene unfolding right in front of him. He turns to run but is snapped up by Kim, losing more than half his body. He lifts his neck and swallows the unfortunate merman whole. By now, Maiden rushes to dump all his cargo to run for his life. In the panic, Maiden doesn't forget his little sister Mizan. He runs straight toward their room to get her, to hide. He runs right up to the room and is secretly glad it's so close by. Maiden keeps thinking he can save Mizan, because after all, he specifically rented a room very close to work just in case something went wrong. Just as he thought that, Kim had landed straight on his tiny room, smashing it to pieces. A shockwave flashed for a moment, forcing Maiden to cover his face with his hands. He peeks out to look. His eyes are fixed on the house. It has now turned into a pile of ruins. Kim's movement disperses the smoke quickly. Maiden is stunned to see beneath the rubble a honey candy that Mizan loves most, and the tiny arm sticking out while her body is buried under the stone. Maiden screams in terror and fury. He instinctively grabs a sword from someone who was carrying weapons nearby and charges forward. Maiden roars in hatred, "You damn dragon, die!" He clumsily stabs the sword directly at Kim's foot. Compared to dragon scales, that sword is no better than a dry, fragile twig. It shatters instantly and Maiden is sent flying backward. The scene was utterly desolate. Kim in his dragon form stands towering amidst the sea of deathly fire, spitting out a glob of saliva in contempt for Maiden's naive and useless efforts. Kim came to this place because on the map Hispanic gave him it marked the locations of military supplies and their storage depots. Kim thinks to himself perhaps it's to weaken the Demon King's army. Even though this has nothing to do with him, thanks to it the poor children have something to eat. He remembers the merman from earlier. I didn't expect his power to be this strong, but then he suddenly wonders, should I keep doing what I usually do? Kim continues to submerge the entire city in a sea of deadly fire. 10 hours after Starfish Port Town was blockaded, Julius speaks up. Has everyone heard what happened at Starfish? He clenches his fist in anger because, due to that, his military supplies are depleted, and he has to suffer heavy losses. He asks again, I heard it was done by a dragon. He turns to the girl standing next to him to get her opinion. What do you think? Net speaks up. As a fellow kin, she believes this is impossible because from dusk until dawn is about 9 hours, so it must have breathed fire at least 50 times. And if it's not the legendary Lao Dragon, then it's certainly impossible. Bassanio frowns. So that Lao Dragon is here? Net immediately feels insulted. What do you mean by that, huh? She slams her hand on the table full of rage. Are you doubting the gods, huh? Bassanio lifts his cup of blood wine. That dragon really is here. But we cannot rule out the possibility that it's another Lao Dragon. Zidman says, asserting, that doesn't matter now. What matters is the plan to deal with Kim. Julius agreed and continued asking for opinions from the other council members. Zidman added that rumors about Staphis had already spread throughout the Demon Kingdom. In just one night, that dragon has become a source of sheer terror. If we let the 7 great demon generals step in to soothe this fear, the morale of the entire Demon Kingdom will be boosted. Julius's face darkened. Clearly there was trouble. Fine, I'll go myself. She decided that even if it truly was that dragon, she had to show them the difference in power. Kim is currently being called by the name Staphis Dragon. The one who destroyed many key strongholds of the Demon King's army, devoured countless enemies, and absorbed all sorts of different powers. The raid on the port town was his most successful and efficient battle. Since the hero party regrouped, various demon tribes like the fishmen and insect men have all been wiped out, even though Kim has already gained so much strength. But it is still not enough. Even though his absorption ability has been optimized, even creatures with strong adaptive capabilities can only meet the lowest standards. But thanks to that, Kim understands more about this ability of his. If it continues to develop in that direction, that goal will be accomplished. You will become the pinnacle of all living beings. Kim is currently flying toward another key town. Other monsters, upon seeing the dragon, thought it was one of the 7 demon generals. One monster looked up at the sky and realized in a panic that the creature diving toward them was the Staphis dragon, the one who has recently emerged as a symbol of terror, causing them to scatter in a frenzy. The one from just a moment ago hadn't even run far before Kim snatched it up. Kim just stepped down slightly, and that monster was instantly crushed. Kim lifted his head and took a deep breath. Then he unleashed a vortex of fire, destroying half the city in an instant. An hour later, Neth caught up. She had been putting everything into tracking Kim down. Reports said he was spotted at 6 strongholds an hour ago. Even though she didn't know what he was, she was determined to teach him a lesson. Neth flew near the ruins. The debris below was still glowing red, and Neth had to be on guard. Only an hour and it's already like this. Kim casually picked up a small goblin and popped it straight into his mouth, gulping it down. Neth landed nearby, furious, glaring at Kim with resentment. "This vulgar creature! He's actually eating corpses!" Neth thought to herself. Clearly this thing is a red dragon, but its body is so strange. Kim stood up on 2 legs. The dragon body was muscular and imposing, but those legs didn't seem like a dragon's. Several parts of his body were covered in solid snake-like armor. Neth raised her hand to cast Dragon Law, the dragon tongue technique, a power of dragons that forces others to act according to one's will. By using pressure to force fear upon the opponent, Neth shouted with authority, "Stop!" Kim heard the voice and turned, tilting his head to see what the matter was. Not only did he not stop, but he picked up another monster corpse to absorb. Neth couldn't understand it. The dragon tongue actually had no effect on the dragon before her. No way! The dragon tongue should be able to intimidate any dragon. Neth observed Kim carefully. Clearly this dragon was very strong, but she didn't know who he was. Kim saw this and advised her to drop the habit of thinking her authority and position. Worked on everyone. He also didn't forget to say that if it were him, he would let his target do as it pleased, even if he were pressured. That was enough to infuriate Neth. She was incredibly angry, calling Kim arrogant and asking if he knew who she was daring to speak to her like that. Neth's hands rapidly changed. They became larger and spikier. She would show him. Kim turned his head back with a bored expression. Neth immediately transformed into a giant red dragon wanting to trample Kim. "You stupid little dragon!" Neth mocked, ridiculing Kim's smaller size. She furiously lifted her foot sarcastically, saying he should be crushed by comparison. Neth poured all her strength into attacking Kim. She used both hands to repeatedly pound hard on Kim's head. Neth furiously struck blow after blow while screaming, "Die! Die, Bao!" and let out an ear-splitting roar. 10 minutes later, Neth's arms were sore, but the scene before her was truly hard to believe. Kim was still standing firm in a defensive stance. Neth was also stunned. Kim had just braced himself and remained unharmed by her attacks. She had never met a dragon that strong. Kim glanced at Neth with a probing gaze. Neth looked at him silently. Although he was a dragon, his demon-like muscles were not easily pierced. She concluded that Kim was an extremely powerful dragon, but if he was this strong, she feared others wouldn't be able to do anything to him either. Kim rubbed his chin, thinking, must remember that. Immediately after, he entered a stance to transition to a new experiment, destroying the MTM Slim. Neth thought her plan had been seen through by Kim and became flustered. Seeing Kim take a stance, Neth was certain she had been read like a book and wanted to switch to attacking. After all, his defense had weakened significantly. She used one hand to block one of Kim's arms instantly, wrapped her tail tightly around his other arm, and quickly raised her other hand to squeeze hard and grab his head. Neth opened her mouth wide and lunged, biting hard into Kim's shoulder, a painful blow. Neth pulled back, tearing off a chunk of flesh, and casually kicked Kim, sending him sprawling. Kim was knocked far from where he had been. She chewed and swallowed the piece of flesh, triumphantly saying, "How about that? These teeth of mine can crush anything." But she couldn't celebrate for long. The open wound on Kim's shoulder had already healed. Neth broke into a cold sweat. Is this dragon a super regenerator? What the hell is this thing? Kim slowly stood up and said, "We've only just met, so I'll consider this the end. The body performance test." Saying that, he turned and walked away. "Since you've cooperated, I'll spare your life. Get going and don't you follow me." These words from Kim instantly made Neth feel deeply insulted. She roared, "Don't be ridiculous. You dare to wound my pride." Neth opened her jaws. "I'll show you the calm power of a dragon," Neth said, lifting her head high to summon a massive orb of energy. "This is the ability to suppress all power." Then she crushed it into dust. Kim didn't show a hint of fear or hesitation. He just asked, "Is that it? Guess I'll have to make my move then." "Eat this," Nette threatened, but suddenly she started coughing up a thick, pitch-black, lethal substance. The energy orb vanished instantly as she began puking up writhing creatures. She violently vomited a pool of black slime filled with dozens of squirming things. Stunned and terrified, she whispered, What is this? Why is this happening?" Before her consciousness could fade, her massive form collapsed forward, sprawled out on the ground. Kim calmly replied, "It's because you swallowed a piece of my flesh. From now on, those disgusting creatures will act as parasites inside you, rapidly devouring everything you are." He stood tall over her motionless body and continued, "So anything you try to eat will give you severe indigestion. Then again, there won't be an after for you anyway." And right at that moment, a magic circle appeared beside Kim from which an urgent, desperate plea for help rang out. "Danger, save us." Kim looked over. "Is that telepathy?" The voice on the other end kept begging, "Hurry, help me!" A warrior holding a sword stood in the middle of a vast sky. "I am both a hero and a messenger of the goddess, and I come from 15 years in the future." That warrior had fought bravely against monsters. In 15 years, humanity and the demon race would join forces to fight creatures that want to destroy this world. Looking at the fallen monsters, the warrior silently continued his thoughts. "In the future, the demon king, the 7 great demon generals, and the 4 heavenly kings all perish because of these creatures. Even I was killed by them." The warrior gripped his sword courageously, silently resolving, "That is why I, having returned from the future, must hurry to the great forest to destroy Slim before it evolves into a world-destroying monster." The warrior was with a tall man carrying a massive weapon on his shoulder. Looking at the barrier shielding the doorway, he continued his train of thought. Because of that, Lord Kim, who is guarding the great forest, has been kept safe, and Lord Kim even saved the prince who was originally fated to die. The warrior looked straight ahead with intense resolve. Since the future has been changed, those who were meant to die have been saved. However, he also had another thought. On the other hand, because the future has changed, I have no idea what will happen from here on out. The warrior tightened his grip on his hand. But I don't regret killing that monster and giving up the future I once knew. The only thing I regret is, if I had known about the Demon King's army in the future. The warrior felt a pang of regret. If I had only known, then I wouldn't have had to suffer like this. Or at least at the poker table, Bassanio smiled while watching Hippanic slump over the table. He smirked. I only need to know his ability, that's all. The 3 of them, the warrior Hippanic and the saint, were traveling together when the warrior suddenly turned and asked, "But Prince, where exactly did you send Lord Kim?" Hippanic immediately replied, "I asked him to watch over an important area. He's more than enough to handle that place on his own." Hearing this, the warrior seemed to understand. "I see, so that's it," Hippanic continued, "and according to the map, we're almost at our next destination." Suddenly, something seemed to appear in front of them, catching Hippanic off guard. He gasped, "Ah!" All 3 froze in their tracks. In front of them, Bassanio flashed a wicked grin. "Welcome, heroes," he said, bowing with mock courtesy. "I am Bassanio Zegrisos, one of the 7 great demon generals known as the Greedy One. This is Vegas, the town I govern." He asked, "Would you like to stop the bloodshed and settle this peacefully?" Hippanic, still unsure of his intentions, asked, "What do you mean by that?" Bassanio immediately proposed a simple offer. "I mean, let's play a game to decide the winner." Hippanic was taken aback by the bizarre suggestion. Why a game all of a sudden? What are you plotting? Contrary to that, the warrior didn't think twice and agreed immediately. "Fine, I agree." Hippanic was shocked by the warrior's sudden consent. He called out confused, "Hero!" But the warrior seemed to have his own private thoughts. He mused, "I've slaughtered too many people to get to this point. So I want to stop." Bassanio laughed wickedly. "Very well." Inside, he kept mocking, "What a fool." The three followed Bassanio into a casino. A man standing on the upper floor announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, today's special event is—" The three of them looked up with determined eyes. The announcer on the balcony continued shouting, "A duel between the party of heroes and the 7 great demon generals, the greedy Bassanio Zegrisos." He smiled a smile that never seemed to leave his face. He added, "Let's see which side the goddess of the Elmos continent will favor." The surrounding crowd quickly began to whisper among themselves, "So are the heroes going to die here? Ha ha ha! Today the last ray of hope for humanity will be extinguished." Hippanic sat at the table, frowned, and decided, "I'll start first." Bassanio didn't refuse and accepted quickly. "The game is poker. If you win, Prince, you may leave this place unharmed." Hippanic replied, "Fine." He remembered that he had played this type of game before. "I've got some confidence back when I was infiltrating the poachers group. I mastered this little game. That monster doesn't stand a chance against me now." Bassanio remained calm and added another condition. "If you lose, I'll claim your soul." Furious, Hippanic flipped the cards into the air and shouted, "You bastard, are you a scammer?" The old man smirked and retorted, "Scammer, what am I scamming exactly?" He immediately turned the tables, saying, "Didn't you say yourself if you aren't caught in the act, it's not cheating?" Hippanic insisted, "No way, this round doesn't count. If I had known what kind of games you were playing." The old man's smile turned twisted and soulless. "As promised," Bassanio reiterated, "I will claim your soul." The coin on the table suddenly began to smoke, and Hippanic's body started emitting smoke as well. He panicked and screamed, "What the hell is this?" His soul was slowly being pulled into the coin. Once it was fully absorbed, his face appeared on the surface. Hippanic groaned, "I'm in trouble. Someone help me." Bassanio smiled as he watched Hippanic collapse onto the table. The warrior shouted in a panic, "Prince!" The old man explained, "This is just a skill to keep my promises from before." "It's a special skill called force majeure that I possess," he said, laughing loudly. The Saintess Furious lunged at him. "You scum, how dare you do that? She threw a punch straight at Bassanio's face, but he didn't even flinch. He just calmly spoke up. The Saintess was stunned that he was completely unharmed by her blow. Bassanio smiled and explained, "Fighting isn't allowed here because I have a second special skill. It's called the Absolute Peace Zone." The Saintess huffed in anger, while Bassanio chuckled to himself, thinking, "As long as I have these 2 skills, this gambling match is mine. No one can beat me." Suddenly he added, "It seems like the prince is very important to you, isn't he?" The Saintess, hearing that, felt embarrassed and stammered, "Who said that?" Just one probing question was enough to expose her. He thought triumphantly, "You've given yourself away now. People like that are usually called—" He laughed. Seeing the Saintess fuming, Bassanio seized the chance to bait her. "If you want him back, then let's play." He kept enticing her, trying to sway her. "I'll bet his soul and you'll bet your own." By now she was wavering because of his words. The Saintess slammed her hand on the table and agreed, "Fine, let's do it." The warrior saw that the Saintess seemed provoked by the old man's words and warned, "Saintess, don't be so reckless." But she didn't regret her choice at all. Instead, she reassured him, "Don't worry, warrior." She told him, "You know my nickname, the Convent Gambler, isn't just for show." The warrior was surprised and asked, "Wait, the Convent Gambler," she retorted. "What do you think I did in an all-female convent during those long, long winters?" The Saintess asked confidently, "What are we playing? Poker, blackjack, or rock, paper, scissors?" The Saintess flipped the cards into the air, eyes glaring, and snapped, "Pick up the cards first. I choose dice." Bassanio immediately pulled out the dice and gave a smug smile. "Fine." Another coin was tossed. It glowed with a white light. Shortly after, the Saintess collapsed onto the table. Just like Hippanic before her, her soul was sucked into the coin, and her face appeared on the surface. Bassanio wiped the sweat from his brow and exclaimed, "Phew, it's been a while since I've faced an opponent." Like this. The warrior couldn't believe his eyes. Even the Saintess couldn't win after Hippanic, and the Saintess, the next target he set his sights on, was the warrior. He asked, "What are you going to do, warrior, if you want to save your teammates? Bet your soul and play." He laughed loudly. The warrior stood there, hesitant, thinking, I've never gambled in my entire life. Isn't there any other way? Suddenly, he looked into the distance. His face lit up. Seeing Kim appear, he shouted happily, "Lord Kim!" The warrior had been backed into a corner. If he had never gambled, how could he possibly win? But if he abandoned his friends in danger, it would go against the knight's code. Besides, he couldn't just leave them where they were. Just then a noise came from outside the door. The warrior jumped, looking back as the door began to rattle violently. Suddenly, someone flew through the door, shattering it instantly. The person landed sprawled out in front of the warrior. He was still dazed, not understanding what happened, but his face shifted to relief, as if he'd found gold because Kim had arrived. Through the smoke, Bassanio smiled gleefully at the sight of Kim. To him, this seemed like a hot new guest. The spectators watching from above immediately judged Kim as a brute, a man who only knew violence, even viewing him like a new item for their collection. Kim just rolled his eyes, observing the fools lying slumped in the corners. He muttered to himself that he'd settle this quickly, so he could get back to his unfinished business. Seeing Kim ready to swing his sword, Bassanio warned him that violence was useless here because of his exclusive skill, absolute peace. Kim turned to the warrior to confirm the truth. The warrior nodded, somewhat afraid, explaining that the skill was the reason everyone here had lost their strength. Kim's face turned menacing. He whispered, "I see the problem now." Bassanio did, acting dismissive. "The prince and that priestess have already lost and left their souls behind." Kim quickly understood what the guy meant. He asked how to get them back. Bassanio slammed his hand on the table, demanding that Kim must win. He said Kim had to bet something of equal value. If he wanted to redeem their souls, Kim had to put his own soul on the line. Kim confirmed he understood. With a dead calm voice, he immediately accepted. He kicked the armrest aside to make room and sat down. Kim boldly bet his own soul and the warrior's as well. The warrior was stunned. Bassanio was thrilled, and the whole room erupted into a noisy frenzy. The warrior hurriedly turned to ask, "Kim, what are you saying?" Kim calmly replied that since the other side had taken 2 souls, it was only fair to respond in kind. Bassanio laughed, fully agreeing with Kim. Clever people really do think alike. Kim reassured the warrior, telling him not to worry as he would win easily. That was the very thing Prince Edward Grayson had told him to believe. Yet Kim glanced at the warrior, his voice hardening. "Besides, betting on him is better than you just standing there with your eyes closed." Accepting his fate and trusting in Kim, the warrior turned to Bassanio and asked if he had heard that clearly. Bassanio was satisfied and asked what game they were going to play. Kim immediately clenched his fist, swung it up, and shouted, "This game!" Bassanio thought it was rock, paper, scissors. Kim replied, "Rock," and delivered a straight punch directly into the face of that greedy pig. Kim's powerful punch sent him crashing to the ground. According to the experimental results, skills could not directly affect Kim's body. In other words, he was immune to direct effect abilities. But he could still be injured if hit by physical objects like a ball of fire, similar to how he took damage from accelerated arrows even though Eyeshot aimed the arrows straight at himself. Or an Inferno Ray, a skill that turns targets into ashes. So what about Bassanio's ultimate peace skill? Of course, it was worthless against Kim since it was the type of skill that relied on targeting others. When Bassanio tried to use violence in the special zone and saw that his skills were ineffective, he was utterly bewildered with 1,000 question marks appearing over his head before he could even react. Kim lifted his leg and stomped down hard on Bassanio, who screamed at the top of his lungs in agony. Once Bassanio felt the pain in his own body, he accepted his defeat. The sensation of being beaten rose intensely within him, and Bassanio's absolute compliance skill was triggered. As per the initial agreement, Bassanio naturally lost. The 2 teammates' souls immediately returned, and the warrior stood there in shock, as did the woman beside him. Meanwhile, Bassanio lay flattened on the floor, struggling to argue that Kim had cheated, clearly unhappy with the outcome. Kim immediately proposed another game to indulge him, betting Bassanio's life against everything he owned. He told him to guess whether he would punch him with his left hand or his right. As soon as he started, Bassanio desperately tried to make a guess, which was, of course, wrong. At that same moment, Kim lifted his foot again. This leg looked even more muscular and powerful than before. Kim decisively stomped down on Bassanio, and blood splattered everywhere. All the spectators above were stunned to see Bassanio, one of the 4 heavenly kings, defeated. They panicked and fled in all directions, terrified that Kim would wipe them all out. But he wasn't about to let that trash leave this place alive. Using his power, Kim slammed all the doors shut, leaving not even a single escape route. The warrior spoke up to stop Kim, saying there was no need for such meaningless slaughter. But Kim didn't care about his words, believing they were all just garbage who found pleasure in watching others have their souls taken. Sending this trash away was the only thing worth doing. The warrior tried to stop Kim one more time, insisting that this wasn't right, but Kim grew annoyed with the warrior's constant preaching and held his sword against the man's throat. The warrior couldn't believe his eyes, not understanding what Kim was doing. Just as the prince had said before, it was either about doing a good deed or doing the right thing. Kim asked the warrior if he would choose fairness or doing what was right. Having said that, he withdrew his sword. If the warrior had no intention of helping, he should just take the other two people out, because to Kim, someone who didn't even know what they wanted was only a burden. Hearing this, the warrior remained silent, helped the other two, and led them away. But the moment he stepped outside, the only exit slammed shut in a flash. Those trapped inside began to scream for help in desperation, but no one could hear them. "Let's begin," Kim said, puffing out his cheeks as if holding something in his throat, and immediately after he spewed out flames that flared up, incinerating the entire room. It was followed by screams that reached the heavens. Those who couldn't run in time were blocked by Kim's command to lock the doors. One person among them panicked. Clinging to the bars of the door, he kept screaming to have it opened because a murderer was behind him. Cries for help echoed throughout the casino, and some cursed that they wished they had never come to this place. The betting game with the pig-headed man had come to an end, and according to the agreement, the pig-headed man's power now belonged to Kim. As he received that power, countless thoughts immediately sprang into his mind, one of which was the ownership of this casino. This place had originally been in the hands of that guy. That was why he could manipulate everything at will. But now it was Kim's turn to do the same, and he could do whatever he wanted. Kim calculated silently. He had always liked to wander and experience different places. It was a pity there was no time, so he decided to just get rid of all the fire suppression equipment, pump more oxygen into the building, and then a tiny spark would be enough. While Kim was silently plotting in his head, those who remained were still fearfully trying to find a way to escape, but all efforts were futile. A small spark flew from Kim's mouth, followed by a fierce inferno that consumed the entire casino, along with everyone inside. The warrior had just made it out the door when the fierce fire flared up right behind him, sending a chill down his spine. He suddenly remembered what Kim had said earlier, that there was no one left here who mattered. So would he choose justice or doing the right thing? Even though he still felt reluctant inside. The warrior finally grimaced, turned away, and decided to ignore it all. In another room, two people were sitting across from each other. Julius spoke up, saying there were only two of them left. But as he finished, a shadow stepped in along with a mysterious voice. "How can that be? It was the Demon King." Her appearance left both of them in shock. Julius and Zygmunt immediately stood up respectfully, cupping their hands in greeting. Julius reported that they had lost contact with Netcon and Vegas. Bassanio's territory had also been seized, and currently Bassanio was missing. The Demon King asked for the probability that Bassanio was still alive, and Julius hesitated for a moment before sadly replying. The Demon King lamented the loss of his two talents, expressing that the odds of success were incredibly slim. Richmond offered some consolation, saying that even without the four heavenly kings, the plan was still moving forward, so he urged the Demon King not to grieve so deeply. But the Demon King countered, asking how one could not be heartbroken over the death of comrades who had always been by his side. Richmond lowered his voice to apologize, yet noted that they were the ones who had volunteered to stop the heroes. It was a true tragedy. But if that sacrifice could make their grand goal easier to achieve, then their deaths would not have been in vain. Those words convinced the Demon King. Thanks to their sacrifice, the heroes had faltered, bringing the plan closer to completion. They had given their lives for the greater good. But the Demon King couldn't stop the pain in his heart. He turned away, saying he was tired, and decided to leave. His figure flickered, blurred, and eventually vanished. Julius promised he would finish the remaining tasks alongside Richmond. Richmond remarked that in times like these, Julius needed more comforting, as his name was Lust. Julius coldly denied it, saying that wasn't the meaning of his name, and added that Richmond's name was Envy. He felt that none of their names really fit them, but it didn't matter. The important thing now was that the Demon King's plan had reached its final stage. Julius insisted that even if they died, they must absolutely not back down. Richmond continued, asking, "Between the two of us, who would be better off dying later?" Julius's lips trembled with hesitation, and Richmond said it would obviously be him. Julius was caught off guard by Richmond's words. The other replied, "Don't give me that look. Since I'm the older one, I'll go first." Then Richmond turned and walked away. At the casino, after the massive inferno, only a pile of ruins remained. Kim crawled out from the charred debris. Burning down the casino could have put him in danger, because the regeneration ability derived from the super-regenerating dwarf in his blood would also weaken when exposed to fire. Dragon scales and lizard mucus had helped Kim protect his body, but if the newly regenerating parts touched fire, he would still be seriously injured. Kim brushed the dust off his armor. He had foreseen this happening, and had once come close to danger because he was too distracted in the battle against the dragon. At that time, if his newly regenerating shoulder had been hit by dragonfire, the situation would have been critical. Suddenly behind him, beneath the pile of rubble, something moved. A giant golden lizard slowly crawled out, wearing a collar suggesting it had been kept in captivity before. Kim wondered if this was a pet raised by the demons. The lizard stood tall in front of him. Its massive frame forced it to look down at Kim. Its body was still covered in small, unextinguished embers. Kim marveled that it could withstand dragonfire. That was truly rare. He observed that it must have been about 3 meters tall. Then, Kim pulled back the corner of his mouth to reveal sharp fangs and told it to have a taste. The expression on his face grew twisted. The lizard sensed something ominous from the creature before it and tried to turn and flee, but Kim wouldn't give it a chance to escape. With one hand, he grabbed its tail and yanked it backward. In a flash, Kim opened his mouth wide, revealing sharp teeth, his face transforming as jagged veins bulged out. Kim bit hard into the lizard's neck. Blood splattered everywhere, and right then and there, its fate was sealed. It was to become Kim's meal. Kim headed out to regroup with the others. Hippie stood nearby, holding his head with his hand and frowning, complaining that his head still ached so much. Inside, there was truly the worst, he said. Hippie glanced at Kim, and seeing him satisfied and licking his lips, asked what was so funny that he kept chuckling. Inside, he silently cursed him as a villain. Kim didn't tell him what just happened. He only replied that he had finished putting out the fire. Blood from his meal still stained his hands. That lizard was a salamander, a rare species immune to dragonfire, and he had just eaten it. Its fire resistance didn't just exist in the outer layer of slime, but was distributed within every cell of its entire body. Of course, he could still use the power of the dwarf, even without the slime, but now all his weaknesses had been perfectly compensated for. Hippie, standing next to him, suddenly frowned and shook his head, even swearing under his breath. Kim didn't understand why he reacted that way. Hippie recounted that someone had once been attacked by a bear, but by the time the wounds healed, the person couldn't even remember it clearly. Then suddenly that bear appeared, right in front of his house, and now it was even flying in the sky. How would that person feel? Kim replied that as long as the bear knew how to return to where it used to live, it would eventually leave quietly. There was no need to worry so much, but Hippie still felt uncomfortable because the logic he perceived was completely different from the feeling in his heart. Kim silently considered that the first step was cooperation. If he only saw it as a source of fear, it could backfire. Kim reasoned that no matter how ferocious it was, if that bear was useful, it would be less terrifying. Hippie caught something in Kim's words and asked, "What are you talking about?" Kim explained that while Hippie was lost in thought, he had done everything for him. Hippie asked in surprise, "Is that true?" Kim revealed that the warrior had abandoned the side of righteousness and chosen the right path. Hippie appeared satisfied with that result. This was already the second time. He flashed a cunning smile and said that there was only one more request to complete. The warrior in front was completely unaware of Hippie's dark calculations behind his back. The heroes were the strongest people on this continent. The warrior stood there, gazing into the distance with a steadfast look filled with strength and confidence. Their strength was not merely physical, for they were the ones protected by a massive current, called destiny. And then the warrior suddenly foresaw something ominous. A group of thugs was aggressively marching toward the warrior and his comrades. They loudly called them heroes and ordered an attack. A sword swung straight at the warrior. Thankfully, he dodged just in time, and it only grazed his hair. If he were an ordinary person, he would have been done for. He would have already cheated death 3 or 4 times in those most critical moments. Another guy came charging on horseback with a fierce axe in his hand. But before he could even strike, the warrior rushed forward and slashed him. The saintess behind them shouted a warning to be careful because they were the Demon King's soldiers. At the moment of total despair for a hero, as someone will always appear to help them. If they are forced to confront an enemy that is too strong, that assistance will unintentionally find its way to them. Kim did not participate in the fight ahead. He just watched silently. If they fall into a situation where they can only rely on luck, then luck will always be on the side of the warriors. The warrior tightened his grip on his sword. His eyes locked straight ahead. He darted toward the enemies as fast as an arrow. To kill a hero, one must possess enough power to overturn destiny itself, but so far no one has ever reached that level. That is why the Demon King beheads the human hero, and the Human King beheads the hero of the demon race. However, the protection of destiny only takes effect when a hero is still a true hero. Before long, the warrior had wiped out all those uninvited guests. Their bodies lay scattered everywhere. If a hero loses their status, the warrior returned to report to Hippie that they were still a long way from their destination. Thankfully, they had found horses. Hippie put on a fake smile, saying, "We really got lucky. It's all thanks to the good fortune of the heroes whom the goddess protects." As he spoke, he stepped onto the carriage. The warrior had no idea that the smile was just a mask for another sinister plot. Destiny was no longer protecting the heroes. Hippie told Kim, who was sitting in the back of the carriage, that the condition to be a hero is to be the most righteous, the most just, and the most kind. The warrior had done something unrighteous at the village. The demon race did not choose the correct path at the casino, so if they lose their sense of justice, they will no longer be heroes. That is exactly what Hippie wants. Kim couldn't understand at all why they wanted to kill the heroes so badly. Hippie said that actually his original plan wasn't like that. He had taken the old man's draft, that crazy guy's draft, and tweaked it a bit. Kim asked what he was talking about. Hippie recounted that the king intended to pass the throne to the eldest prince, while the two younger princes, including Hippie, would serve as assistants to the eldest. So whenever he remembered the king, he remembered a way to make a hero, and no longer be a hero. Hippie recalled the look of shock mixed with worry on the warrior's face. He believed that the king had forced the heroes to make an unavoidable choice. Then he stripped them of their status. But the king only stopped at the planning stage because he feared the goddess's wrath and dared not carry it out, and by chance, Hippie had seen it. Unsealing the seal was also quite taxing. Based on that plan, Hippie had modified it in his own way and started implementing it. Now Kim understood Hippie's intentions. But what he wanted to ask wasn't whose plan it was, but why they wanted to kill the heroes, since those heroes didn't deserve to die. Facing Kim's questions, Hippie gritted his teeth and replied that if his brother died, the king's despair would be far greater than his own sadness. Hippie's hands tightened on the reins. The blue veins popping out on his face showed his uncontrollable resentment. On the flashfield plains, their carriage was moving forward, surrounded by lush green grass stretching out, and the wide-open sky. From a distance, Kim had spotted the Demon King's castle. Hippie saw it too, but strangely, even though they had reached the outskirts of the castle, there were no soldiers guarding the outside. Hippie thought this was illogical because according to the game's setting, the Demon King's castle is usually located in a lava region, or in the middle of a toxic swamp. Yet the castle before their eyes was built right next to an ordinary meadow. It was too strange. Regarding that unrealistic thought, Kim dismissed it. What kingdom would build that crazy thing in the heart of the capital? If one did, I'd want to see it once. At the same time, Kim also agreed with Hippie that this place was truly very unusual. Hippie scanned his surroundings and concluded that there wasn't even an ant nearby. Kim added that he couldn't even see any grasshoppers. The area they had just passed through even had rabbit burrows, but they were empty inside. Hippie didn't understand what had happened to this place. He didn't know for sure, but he was certain that something was definitely ahead. Suddenly, the horse sensed something ominous. It let out a frightened neigh. Hippie, holding the reins, had a bewildered look on his face. He was worried and didn't understand why the horse suddenly acted like that. The horse stood frozen, bowed its head, and kept shivering. Hippie walked toward it, guessing that it was scared, but there was nothing around. The horse's behavior caught the warrior's attention. He asked what was wrong. Hippie replied that the horse refused to move. The warrior thought that maybe it was just tired. Suddenly, a strange feeling arose in his heart. He suspected whether this feeling was caused by the Demon King's castle or something else. Seeing the warrior's expression, Hippie asked if he felt anything unusual. The warrior replied that while he did feel strange, he wasn't sure what it was. He reasoned that if they got closer to the Demon King's castle, they might know the cause, but with the horse in its current state, they had no way to keep moving. The horse just stood there, stubbornly refusing to take another step. They tried every way to coax it. Hippie spoke gently and tried to feed it, but it wouldn't even open its mouth. Fearing it might be injured, they even had the mage use restoration magic, but it had absolutely no effect. Kim even tried draining the killing intent, but the horse just kept trembling, so it was useless. Finally, the warrior even used a gentle and warm tone to talk about the importance of the battle against the Demon King. But of course, everything was ineffective. With no other choice, the warrior decided to camp out for the night. Hippie agreed and reminded everyone to take a rest. Just as he reached out to touch the carriage railing, the horse neighed again. This time it didn't just neigh. It kicked its back legs hard at Hippie, making him stumble, and then it immediately bolted. Hippie fell onto the dirt, watching the horse race away, having no idea what was happening. Unlike Hippich, the warrior had seemingly sensed something amiss. He instantly drew his sword and shifted into a battle stance, while Hippich looked between him and the warrior with suspicion. A voice dripping with mockery echoed from the darkness, announcing that they were surrounded and sneering. "So this is all the group of heroes amounts to?" Truly disappointing, both foolish and completely lacking in vigilance. From the shadows, a staff topped with a grotesque hand-shaped ornament slowly emerged, and its owner continued to speak. He taunted that their tracking abilities were worse than a pack of wild beasts. It was Richmond. With a tone as eerie as if it were rising from the depths of hell, he mused that he couldn't understand how they had managed to survive until now. The warrior frowned at him and barked, "Show yourself." Richmond asked if he truly needed to introduce himself. Since he hadn't exactly been hiding, he obliged with a brief introduction. As he finished, he slammed his hand-shaped staff into the ground, and the entire area shuddered violently. Hippich broke into a cold sweat. "Is the ground shaking?" Instantly, a hand burst upward from the earth, and in the blink of an eye, thousands of gruesome arms appeared as hordes of undead clawed their way out of the soil, poised to attack. Angela cried out in horror, "Annette!" Only then did the man speak. "I am Richmond, one of the 4 heavenly kings, and the one who will stand in your way." So this was Richmond the Envious, the one known as the Envious One. One of the supreme leaders of the Demon Kingdom with nearly 200 years of experience in command. Currently, 3 generations of Demon Kings had come and gone, and he had clashed with heroes more than twice over those 200 years. For more than half of that time, he had served as the Grand Vizier. The Demon King manages all internal and external affairs. No other demon, even those with double the lifespan of a human, could ever achieve such a feat. But he is an undead. He is not some low-level undead like a zombie or a skeleton, nor is he a weakling forced to periodically drink human blood like a vampire. He is a lich, the highest form of undead. As long as the relic holding his soul and magic remains intact, he is immortal. Once he dies, he simply returns even stronger than before. His arrogance seemed to pierce the very heavens. Even the generals in the demon castle, and sometimes even the Demon King himself, dared not defy him. Before that fateful incident, the hero of the previous generation had struck directly at the demon castle, and Richmond had summoned countless undead from the abyss to halt the hero's advance. But they were all wiped out by the hero's holy light, and in the end he himself was destroyed. By the time his body was reconstructed from his relic, the hero had already killed the Demon King and returned. The people there, upon recognizing him, cursed him repeatedly as a selfish, arrogant, envious one. The Demon King is dead. How can he still have the nerve to keep on living? Did he run away from the battlefield because he was afraid to die? In that moment, Richmond's towering pride plummeted to the very bottom. But Richmond was not some mediocre being. He was a genius mage. He did not blame others for his failures. Instead, he studied to find the root cause of his own defeat, and he discovered that the primary factor was the hero's holy magic. His undead army would surely be weakened significantly by that kind of power. Thus he strove to cultivate divine tolerance for himself and the undead he summoned. The results were displayed right before them. Countless undead stood tall. Surrounding the heroes, the 3 of them could only huddle together. Angela gasped in panic. "How is this possible? Why can't I sense those undead?" The elder of the 2 princes couldn't understand it either, as undead were supposed to make the living feel their malice and hatred, yet he couldn't feel even a shred of it. Angela was extremely guarded. These undead, even standing right in front of someone with holy arts, they don't emit a single trace of evil aura. But they are still undead. Use your holy magic. Angela immediately followed suit, unleashing a holy attack directly at an undead, yet its body remained completely unharmed, not even a scratch. The group stared in stunned horror. "What is this?" "Impossible. Holy magic. Can't harm the undead." Richmond laughed heartily. "Pretty panicked, aren't you? There is still something more interesting." As he finished speaking, he struck his hand staff into the ground, a magic circle appeared, and these undead were actually capable of doing the exact same things they could. The elder of the two princes was stunned to his core. "What is this? He even has holy magic." Angela was speechless. "How on earth did they do that?" Richmond said he would reveal his secret technique, and a book appeared before their eyes. Angela shouted in disbelief, "Is that the Holy Scripture of the Goddess Church?" She asked Richmond how he had obtained it. He immediately replied, "Naturally, it is because I am a devout follower of the Goddess Church. All the undead on this plane, including myself, are followers of the Goddess Church. That is why they do not carry hatred or malice toward the living." Angela couldn't believe that an undead could be a follower of the Goddess Church. Richmond asked her, "You have been with the Goddess Church for over 15 years, right?" "I have been a follower long before you were even born. I have read the Holy Scripture for 55 long years to attain this divine tolerance." Following the example of saints and martyrs to change his ways, he loudly proclaimed, "My piety is superior to yours, it is second to none." He raised his book and declared, "Those who have followed the faith for 15 years are no better than the youngest child among us." Then he looked at Angela and pointed to one. "Andes, you are only on the level of that little boy." She stared at the scene, her face frozen in despair, thinking, "Does my faith really provide such things?" Richmond continued, "Andy's hatred and resentment are what make us envious of the living, but the jealousy carved into my marrow has been resolved by my devotion. I have mastered envy. I am the true sovereign of envy, Zickman the Envy Rose." Angela adamantly refused to accept Zickman's words. "Impossible. The undead are nothing like those who worship the righteous and benevolent goddess. A person like you could never possess faith." Zickman told her, "Everything in this world is created by the goddess, therefore. Even a bug or a grain of sand can possess faith. The undead were created by the goddess. It is thanks to her magic that these bodies can move. So this is not impossible. A saint should know this, shouldn't she?" Angela was startled to realize that what he just said was a quote from St. Elan chapter 6, page 11, verse 22. She gritted her teeth and said, "But even if you have faith, the goddess would never bless a demon like you." Zickman recited effortlessly, "Those who achieve the seemingly impossible will receive a greater reward than those who do the simple things." An excerpt from the Memoirs of St. Alex, chapter 3, page 21, line 7. "If a demon achieves righteous and pure faith, shouldn't it be rewarded by the goddess?" Angela clenched her fists, her whole body trembling. "You are just an undead demon practicing necromancy." But deep down, she knew clearly that everything he said was true. He was undoubtedly a believer of the goddess. She told Richmond to let them pass, because they were carrying out a mission entrusted by the goddess. Unexpectedly, Richmond replied, "Just as heaven has its laws, the mortal realm has its own, and one should not ignore the laws of the mortal realm just for the laws of heaven. You must prioritize the laws of the mortal realm before following heavenly ones, even if following the goddess is the right thing to do. I have offered this body to the Demon King. It is only natural that I serve the Demon King." Angela gritted her teeth. That is a quote from the goddess's teachings, page 1, line 15. Zickman closed the book and put it away. "Our conversation ends here. My undead army has waited long enough. Kill them all." The undead surged forward immediately. Angela charged ahead, casting a holy barrier against them. However, just like last time, the zombies were completely unaffected by her techniques. She fell into fear. As expected, I cannot block them with the holy barrier. At that critical moment, a skeleton grabbed her arm, ready to bite down. Suddenly, a blinding light flashed. Hippanic had timely deployed his light shield. He knocked the undead away and shouted, "Angela, this is no time to be distracted. Focus!" Finishing his sentence, he lunged forward, wiping out the zombies surrounding her. Angela felt a surge of emotion, remembering her childhood, when SD had also protected her from a pack of wolves. She quickly pulled herself together. No, a saint is not allowed to have these feelings. Hippanic was still struggling to fight the hideous undead. Angela regained her composure and quickly apologized to him for losing focus. Meanwhile, Kim was still nonchalantly sleeping on the carriage. An undead stumbled toward him, but before it could do anything, it took a punch to the head, caving it in, and vanished on the spot. Kim grumbled, "So noisy." So, the warrior anxiously asked, "Are you okay?" Kim didn't answer but jumped off the carriage. The two princes were extremely tense. "I'm glad you're okay. These undead aren't affected by light magic." Seeing Kim walking straight ahead without hesitation, the prince called out, "Wait, Lord Kim. Light magic doesn't work on them. Don't rush." Kim glanced back and asked coldly, "So what?" Just then, an undead lunged at him. Kim remained calm. He gently used his sword to parry its arm, then grabbed the limb and twisted it backward. Kim forcefully ripped the undead's arm off its body. Then he crushed it to pieces. After finishing, he turned back and calmly muttered, "If you hit them, they still shatter all the same." The two princes' older brother broke into a cold sweat seeing that. But at the same time, he realized that the prejudice that one must use light magic to fight the undead had led him to think incorrectly. Just because holy magic is ineffective doesn't mean they can't be destroyed. One just needs to swing the sword a bit more. Even if holy magic doesn't work, they are still just minions of the Demon King, and a holy sword would certainly still deal a massive amount of damage to them. He immediately rushed in, telling himself he would destroy them without severing them, because as long as holy magic isn't in effect, the undead that have been cut down will still stand up again. An ordinary sword wouldn't last, but a holy sword is indestructible. Angela by now had also regained her composure and fought with all her might. If all iron is forged into weapons and armor, what will farmers have for tools? Just 2 bare fists are enough to protect a pious believer. That is what the Pope taught 1,000 years ago. Hispanic specializes in light magic, so it is indeed troublesome when he cannot use it. But magic was never meant to be used in only one way. Kim felt that they were doing even better than he had anticipated, but unfortunately the number of enemies was too high. If this kept going, no one knows when this will ever end. Richmond burst into wild laughter. "Keep struggling, then. Even if you killed 1,000 undead, that wouldn't even be 1% of my entire army. You'll all eventually become part of my legion." He threw his head back and laughed maniacally. He was crazed and supremely arrogant, but suddenly, cold sweat broke out all over him as a fire dragon appeared right before his eyes. A dragon burst out from the sea of raging flames, leaving Richmond, the warrior, and the saintess completely stunned. In this extreme situation, the two of them were actually sitting on the back of a dragon while that skeleton guy could only stare up at it. And that red dragon was none other than Kim. Looking down at the ground, the warrior realized the group below was being completely surrounded by the Andes. Seeing Kim reveal his form, the saintess assumed he had changed his mind, and she was right. Without a word, he flew straight toward the Demon King. This made the warrior feel uneasy. He couldn't sense any clear intentions behind Kim's actions. He couldn't help but wonder if SD even knew about this. He turned to Hispanic and stammered, asking if Kim was actually a dragon. Facing such an unexpected question, Hispanic didn't know how to respond at first. But very quickly after that, he still answered the warrior, telling him that Kim was not a dragon. However, the prince's answer at this moment was absolutely not enough to satisfy the warrior. "If Kim isn't a dragon, then what on earth is this thing?" Pressed for an answer, the prince didn't know how to explain it. He was so conflicted that he furrowed his brow and squeezed his eyes shut. He could only apologize, as he had previously promised not to reveal Kim's identity to anyone. Hispanic could only give a vague explanation that Kim's background was a bit more special than an ordinary person's. By then, Kim was still soaring in the air while Hispanic continued. To prevent the warrior from having any more strange questions, Hispanic took the initiative to say what he knew Kim was an extremely dangerous person. Dangerous to the point where he could turn all of humanity into his enemies. That was all he could say. The things Hispanic revealed made the warrior form an entirely new line of reasoning. He began to analyze. This person can turn into a dragon and has a background stranger than anyone else. Could it be? He suddenly shouted, "A transformation expert, so Sir Kim is a shape-shifting mage." Faced with that conclusion, Hispanic was so helpless that he could only go along with it, reluctantly replying, Right, that's exactly it." The warrior immediately sank into his own thoughts. Based on what he knew, shape-shifting was a technique only possessed by those with demonic blood. He was convinced that Kim had betrayed the demon race and become a whole new species, half human, half demon. If that were really the case, then he understood SD's intentions. But then he shuddered in fear. What if his entire deduction was wrong? How else could this be explained? What is that terrifying giant monster? Realizing his imagination had run too wild, the warrior quickly calmed himself down. It absolutely can't be that. It can't be. At this moment, he placed his hand on Kim silently, grateful to him because thanks to him they had defeated the demon generals. Most recently, they were saved from the swarm of, and as thanks to him as well. Not only that, when he was still struggling with the monster, Kim used a single sword to strike down that beast of destruction. Thinking through everything one by one, he suddenly gave a faint smile. Because even though it was all thanks to Kim from start to finish, in his eyes he was still deeply suspicious. Even so, he once again firmly insisted that Kim could absolutely not be the monster of destruction. As Kim's back drifted further away, the Andes swarm fell into chaos. Richmond was also drenched in sweat. Oh my God. A while later they approached the fortress. The warrior was surprised that the journey from that spot to here took 30 minutes. Luckily, they had Kim waiting. Looking at the tower ahead, the warrior wondered what it was, as its appearance seemed far too normal compared to what he had imagined. Seeing him blabbering on for so long, Kim spoke up to remind him, "Stop staring at the sky and the ground and look behind you." Hearing Kim say that, the whole group spun around 180 degrees. The sight that appeared left them all startled. No one expected the Andes to keep chasing them. Do these things ever get tired? According to the Saintess's estimate, it would take about 2 hours from this position to the destination. That number made the warrior fall silent. Within 2 hours, they had to kill the Demon King and quickly retreat from this place. Then the whole group would climb onto Kim's back to escape. But would they make it in time? Time was running extremely short. The situation made him grit his teeth. If they couldn't kill the Demon King before the Andes closed the circle, the situation would drag on even longer. Right then, he thought of a solution to this difficult problem. They needed more people. Only then could they buy some time and complete their goal. The warrior then opened his mouth to ask Kim for help. It wasn't clear what he said to Kim, but he landed on the ground immediately. Hispanic and the other two jumped off Kim's back. They asked him to bring them all the way here. "Leave the rest to us," they said, rushing inside while Kim disappeared right after. Just then, the demon guards saw the intruders and were startled. One of them roared, "You humans, where do you think you are? You humans, where did you think you are exactly?" No sooner had he finished speaking than the whole group lunged forward to attack. But before they could even strike, a purple substance was splashed directly onto them. They stared at the slimy liquid coating their hands. The demon didn't know if it was oil or some kind of toxin, but before he had time to figure it out, the substance began to bubble, followed immediately by a massive explosion. Swallowing up 1/3 of the city, Kim, who was hovering in mid-air watching the whole thing unfold, knew that purple liquid wasn't just oil or poison. It was highly flammable fuel that would ignite violently at the slightest spark. Kim looked down with a sharp, calculating gaze. At this point, no one could open a portal to get in anymore. The Andes and Richmond squads couldn't get through either, not unless they dared to cross that wall of raging fire until the fuel burned itself out. Rickman stood there frozen, watching the castle explode. Sweat poured down his face, and he gritted his teeth, silently cursing that absolute disaster of a dragon. Damn it! There's nowhere to run now. Rickman was standing on the back of one of the massive hulking Andes, surrounded by an Andes army so dense it looked like a black tide. All he could see were countless glowing red eyes peering through the darkness. Rickman couldn't tell if this was truly the dragon belonging to Starbucks or not. And in just one day, he managed to fire off nearly 10 shots. Could it be that this lazy bum was actually sparing him? Rickman's hands began to tremble. To him, the enemy's true identity didn't matter anymore. The only thing he cared about was that dragon. Rickman's grip tightened on the shoulder of the Andes, carrying him, leaving the creature bewildered. Rickman's eyes turned blood red, shooting out glints of pure malice. It was a dragon. The Andes had 3 major weaknesses, and with their skin and bones bodies, the first was that they would be obliterated by light magic. Their flesh would start to smoke. Second, they would be destroyed by sunlight, their skin gradually turning rough and withered. Finally, they would simply disintegrate over time. However, the first weakness had been overcome by faith. Their bodies were now covered in a layer of golden light to shield them. To avoid the second weakness, they were forced to power down after sunset. And to prevent their bodies from decaying over time, they had to remove all moisture from their skin. But that in turn created another weakness: they were terrified of fire. Still, Rickman could use fire resistance magic to mitigate some of that impact. That dragon brain of his wasn't helping at all. It was useless to the Demon King. Following Rickman's orders, the Andes kept marching forward. Useless or not, they were just going to burn like dried kindling. Rickman was overflowing with ambition, swearing he would use all his greed to protect the Demon King. This battle was between him and Kim. He had to capture that dragon. Meanwhile, the Hispanic group had pushed deep inside. The warrior darted past the demonic guards, wiping them out with a single slash, and immediately led the way for everyone else. But suddenly, a massive pillar slammed toward him, making him jump. The impact caused a violent tremor, sending debris flying everywhere. Hispanic and the Saintess shouted in unison as they charged forward. From within the thick cloud of dust, a purple foot emerged. That's enough. It was Julius, that deep purple guy holding the pillar. Julius represented the ambition of the demons. He possessed the bloodline of the demon race and had shredded six-pack abs both front and back. He looked incredibly flashy. His demonic origin traced back to the incubus, also known as the lust demons. And that guy who looked so scrawny, that was the Julius from 15 years ago. According to known records, the incubus were a type of witch-like demon army that specialized in seducing humans to absorb their vitality. A quick recap of the past. The Julius of 15 years ago was incredibly confident in his God-given beauty. Every girl would fall into his arms because their race possessed extremely unique magic, so they didn't need to nourish their bodies the conventional way. In the early days, young people avoided having a body that suddenly developed bulging muscles because it was considered incredibly ugly. Julius back then felt the same way, to the point where he would collapse to his knees. If that was the case, a bigger question arose. Why did he become so massive, tough, and muscular now? Why didn't he use his magic instead of choosing raw physical strength as his weapon? Back then he cried so hard that tears streamed down in rows, splattering onto the ground. It was all because of the painful, lingering memories of that parting 15 years ago. Back then, he was far too confident in his God-given looks, thinking he was practically a Korean idol. The flashback ends here, because right at that moment, the warrior lunged forward, sword in hand, charging straight at Julius with an incredibly angry look on his face. Seeing the warrior charging, he immediately raised what remained of the stone pillar. "You little brat. I was just reminiscing and you're already throwing a fit. Did I strike a nerve about your pathetic past?" With that, he hurled the rock block at the warrior. Facing the stone, the warrior didn't flinch. In the blink of an eye, he unleashed countless slashes, shattering the stone pillar instantly. After destroying the pillar, the warrior remained calm and cool, engaging Julius in a head-on clash. At that moment, Julius also began to channel his magic. Focusing all his power into both arms, the warrior's sword and Julius's fist collided simultaneously. The force from both sides created a massive shockwave. Suddenly, from within the smoke and dust, a figure flew out and slammed directly into the wall. It was Julius. The warrior had taken him down in a single blow. Lying on the pile of rubble, he began to reflect. This kind of ending, it really doesn't fit the strongest of the four heavenly kings. If you look closely, this actually fits nature quite well. They are often barbaric, kidnapping people, often taking hostages like Francis, or especially gluttonous like Pagus. Most of them don't have much power, but they are full of rage like none other than Deckers, and lazy to the extreme like Net. Not only that, they engage in wars of convenience to satisfy their personal ambitions. That's Bassanio. Finally, because he had no army, he was fueled by jealousy, so he created an army of his own. Other than Rickman, who else could it be? The Lord of Envy. Brave people usually have a 1-to-1 ratio where their strength reaches its peak. Right then, the warrior looked back, urging the prince and the saintess to catch up quickly. Both immediately answered in unison, "Got it!" A series of numbers appeared before their eyes, as if about to spill off the screen. Julius still lay motionless on the rubble, thinking to himself, is it really true that having only strength is enough to defeat the heroes? He truly wanted to apologize to the Demon King. This was all he could do. He just lay there, spinning, letting those three pass by him. Then Julius went completely limp and didn't move again. By this time, they had reached the door. The warrior reached out to touch it, a look of anxiety flashing across his face, because this was where the Demon King resided. The door slowly creaked open, but contrary to their expectations. Inside was a small girl with long, flowing white hair. Seeing the door open, she turned her head. "Is that you, Julius?" Seeing her, the warrior was stunned. "Is this the Demon King?" Outside the castle walls at this very moment, Kim is facing off against the undead. He starts puffing out his cheeks, looking like he's about to breathe fire. Seeing this, Richmond is incredibly confused. Why isn't he spitting any flames? Is there really no other way than this? He stares at Kim so intensely, his eyes almost cross. Daisy thinks to herself that if he truly can't breathe fire, she has to stall for time. Or should he go provide support to the Demon King? Lost in his thoughts, his staff tightens around the undead he's holding, causing it to whimper in pain. In conclusion, he feels he's done enough supporting for now. As for Kim, he has puffed his cheeks out to the point where he can't hold any more. Immediately after, he dives straight down from the sky toward the undead. Seeing him swoop down, Richmond panics instantly. He's here. He immediately uses his staff's fire magic to buff both himself and the undead. A stream of orange light instantly covers them all, though every one of them shows fear on their faces. Seeing he's fully prepared, Richmond screams, "Come at me, you dragon!" Without needing him to say a word, Kim was already diving, but then suddenly changes direction, pulling up and flying back into the air instead of hitting them, all while keeping his mouth filled with whatever he was holding. A purple fluid starts pouring out of Kim's mouth, the exact same highly flammable substance the three of them had just used. As the liquid falls, it sticks to the undead, leaving them in absolute panic. Seeing that substance, Richmond looks like he's lost his soul, but he recovers quickly. He snaps out of it because the liquid explodes so fast. Now he's stuttering, What is this?" A few drops of the liquid even start settling on the tip of his nose. "This," Richmond shouts toward Kim, who is still busy spitting that stuff all over the remaining undead. No. Could this poison have wiped out the undead? He starts screaming at Kim, calling him an idiot, but then realizes he's actually the idiot he'd been worrying for nothing. After finishing, Kim turns back and replies to Richmond, "Exactly. It doesn't even have any effect," he says, his eyes flashing. Seeing that Richmond is suspicious. Could it really be a bluff? Without caring about him, Kim immediately breathes fire. However, the flames seem a bit weak. Seeing a dragon breathe fire like that makes Richmond a bit stunned. But right after, he laughs like crazy. Damn it all! He clutches his stomach, laughing uncontrollably because no matter how weakened it might be, his body is more than capable of withstanding that level of fire. Yet before he can even finish laughing, a massive explosion erupts. The smile on his face vanishes. What's going on? That's impossible. A bone fragment from one of the undead that just got hit by the blast flies straight toward a gray undead. The bone, still engulfed in flames, touches the liquid on its shoulder and instantly explodes. Another huge explosion forms. Only then does Kim explain to Richmond that while the liquid isn't poisonous, it is extremely flammable, more so than anything else. And roughly after 30 breaths of mine, it goes boom. No sooner had he finished speaking than a chain of explosions erupts, causing a massive firestorm. Watching that scene, Richmond is terrified to his core. "No, this can't be!" The fire is already reaching him. Before he can even utter a final word, the explosion hits him square in the face. Everything is blown to pieces. In that dark space, a jar is shaking violently. Looking closer, cracks appear on the surface, and then it shatters into pieces. The undead scream and scatter, fleeing from the sea of fire. Caused by Kim, just as the explosion hit Richmond, the jar shattered. The eye sockets of the undead turn pitch black, and they all simultaneously stop moving. It's as if all their life force has been drained, and they are gradually swallowed by the flames. Flying in the sky. Kim also realizes that they've stopped. Perhaps it's because the leader is done for. He feels disappointed because it ended before he could even really fight. Looking at the large number of remaining undead, he feels a bit annoyed, but thanks to the power of the fire dragon, he can easily handle them. Without their leader, this lot is just a bunch of corpses with no strength left. Thinking that he feels that it's better to go wipe out the rest inside the Demon King's castle, that would be more useful. With that thought, he ignores the raging fire consuming the undead and returns to his human form. He enters the Demon King's castle. The moment he steps inside, he sees soldiers lying everywhere, groaning, "The hero, the Demon King Kim." He walks alone down the quiet corridor. Suddenly, he spots a large door. As soon as he pushes it open, he hears a noisy argument between several people inside. 3 of them are standing in a Spider-Man-like standoff. They are pointing at each other, arguing, while the warrior is protecting a little lowly girl with horns. Hispania loudly questions the warrior because he says they can't execute her, but instead they must live with the lowly girl. The saintess, standing in the middle, pleads with them, "Please don't argue, don't fight, don't tear each other's clothes, put the weapons down." Just then Kim enters and asks what's going on. Everyone in the room turns to look at him simultaneously. He asks about the situation with the Demon King. The warrior hesitates, because telling him the truth would be very dangerous. Finally, Hispania is the one to speak up. It turns out the lowly girl being protected by the demon lord was right behind them. Hispanic ordered him to take her out, but the warrior immediately stepped in and shouted to stop him. Kim looked at the warrior, asking him to confirm what he just said. Both Hispanic and the warrior confirmed it was the truth. The warrior gritted his teeth, glared at the demon lord, and declared that she wasn't the demon lord anymore, leaving the others completely baffled. The warrior explained that while her body was still the demon lord's, the soul inside had been replaced by someone from another world. He sounded absolutely certain about it. That was because he had used his lie detection skill. Hearing this, Kim glanced at the demon lord, who was cowering fearfully behind the warrior, and thought to himself, if what he's saying is true, so this makes the third person from Earth. The first was Edward, who was reincarnated or reborn as he was born directly into a body in this world. Kim, however, traveled here while shape-shifting, so you could consider him a mutant, whereas the Demon King is a case of an earthling's soul getting stuck, trapped inside this body. In other words, she's a possessor. She was just an incredibly ordinary office worker, but she used to isolate herself, losing herself in military-themed novels. So when she became the Demon King, she couldn't accept reality and convinced herself it was just a dream, because the trope of a soul inhabiting another body appeared so often in the novels she loved to read. That's why she introduced Earth's systems knowledge and concepts into this world. It caused the Demon King's army's power to skyrocket, which broke the balance between humans and demons, forcing the goddess to send a hero. Yet she remained stubborn. She kept thinking that if she just kept playing the game, she'd eventually end up like a main character in a novel. But she isn't a protagonist, and the generals she placed her trust in are now powerless. She ended up purging them all. Only when Julius was defeated did she finally snap out of it, and pure terror consumed her. Now the only thing she can do is beg for mercy. Listening to the whole story, Kim crosses his arms, indifferently questioning her about ordering her subordinates to cause all this chaos. And only when she was on the verge of death did she come running to surrender. The warrior hurriedly tries to justify it, but Kim cuts him off, asking if he truly believes she's from another world, even though Kim himself believes it. At this point, it doesn't matter anymore. The warrior tries to explain, but what he's truly worried about is how many lives have already been lost. He simply doesn't want to kill anyone else with his own hands, seeing the warrior in such pain. Kim remains thoughtful for a moment before signaling to Hispanic. Suddenly he says, "It's time." Hispanic has already drawn his sword. While the warrior is still confused, Hispanic's blade thrusts straight toward him. The warrior instinctively draws his own sword to parry. But because Hispanic's law is so overwhelming, his sword is shattered on the spot. Hispanic's blade instantly reduces both of them to shredded meat. Deep down, a hero must always be righteous, just, and kind. These three things sound similar, but at times they contradict each other. Yet once a hero overcomes that moral crisis, they reap the best results. But the prince and Kim are currently trampling on his kindness. The warrior once took part in the massacre of defenseless people at the weapons factory. That was right, but it wasn't kind. He didn't even condemn the villains in the gambling den, but instead only sought to save his own companions. That was kindness, but not justice. In the end, he even tossed aside his own mission to cover for the Demon King. Even the integrity he always valued has been lost. The hero is no longer righteous, no longer just, and no longer kind. Therefore, the hero is no longer a hero. The warrior stares at Hispanic in shock. He cannot believe it. Hispanic coldly asks him if it hurts when he says his name, because from the moment he demanded they save the Demon King, he ceased to be a hero. Red blood mingles with the broken sword fragments as the indestructible holy sword is now just an ordinary blade. The warrior clutches his stomach in agony and calls out to Hispanic, but Hispanic no longer wants to listen. He slowly sheathes his sword, his heart filled with anger toward the warrior. He is angry at him, but there was no other choice. Hearing that, The warrior stammers, as if trying to say his final words, but before he can utter a sound, he collapses. Witnessing the whole scene, the saint turns pale, staring at Hypanic without blinking. She can't comprehend why things have gone this far. She rushes past Hypanic to check on the warrior, but Kim grabs her hand. The saint stares at him in astonishment, then desperately tries to heal the warrior. But when she sees him just stand there in silence, his veins bulging, she is too terrified to even speak. Immediately after, Kim transforms into a snake-like head bearing his fangs as he bites toward the saint. A few days ago, Kim and Hypanic had planned how to deal with both the warrior and the saint. Kim was somewhat surprised because he thought Hypanic had feelings for her. Hypanic said in a low voice that the warrior loved her too, and admitted he also loved her, but he couldn't let someone with the ability to heal the warrior live. The warrior had abandoned the throne to become a hero, so he could no longer fight for Hypanic's crown, meaning the oath he made to his family couldn't be kept. Hypanic had also investigated the saint's terrifying healing ability, the power to piece together shredded flesh to regenerate a human being. It could indeed be considered a miracle. Then, he looked at the backs of the warrior and the saint, saying that in reality, that ability could be seen as immortality. To deal with the saint, you can't leave behind a single scrap of flesh. Kim turned to ask how he intended to do it. He placed a hand on his shoulder and winked, which annoyed Kim quite a bit, then said that there was still someone here who could turn into a dragon and swallow a human whole wasn't there. Hearing that, Kim calmly denied it because even without turning into a dragon, he could still eat them just fine. Seeing those terrifying sharp jaws, Hypanic could only awkwardly praise his ally as truly reliable. Hypanic then added that even if he swallowed that source of anxiety, the thing swallowed could still cause trouble in his stomach. But Kim immediately dismissed it. To him, once it passes through the esophagus, it disappears to somewhere else. As for that place called somewhere, he didn't know where it was, only that it couldn't be destroyed while still linked to him. Returning to the present, in the middle of the hall, only two people are left standing. Hypanic glances at the dead Demon King, frowning slightly, then turns to ask Kim if he wants to pierce through her completely, because leaving her like that makes him feel uneasy. Kim tells him to step back. Once the regenerative process ends, all abilities disappear, as for those who have exhausted. The strength to fight the Demon King will be granted as a wish by the goddess, and her appearance will serve as definitive proof of the Demon King's demise. Hypanic nodded in agreement upon hearing this, and just as he was still murmuring to himself, a beam of light suddenly flashed, a light emitting from the Demon King's own body. He was lying on the ground immediately after. The space around Kim transformed into a blinding white, and beneath his feet it felt as though he were standing on a puddle of water. The moment he opened his eyes, a cube appeared before him. With many different emotional faces, he stared intently at the object. After a moment, he hesitated slightly and asked, "Are you the goddess?" The cube rotated a face that smiled and then spoke to confirm. Kim felt curious because it didn't look much like the goddess's true form, but the cube gave a very vague answer. Because the interface is naturally supposed to look like the ideal image the person connecting with me subconsciously envisions, but the current subject falls outside that scope. I am the system manager, so I cannot create a suitable interface. Then Kim asked what exactly the goddess was. The cube immediately projected images all around. It then told him that it is the system that creates and maintains the world. Its primary mission is to manage the system, create monsters, and oversee souls. The cycle of reincarnation. Upon hearing this, Kim silently concluded that this wasn't a goddess, it was God. He asked why the goddess brought him to this world, and he received the answer that because the two worlds are close together, it is very easy for chaotic phenomena to occur. Then he continued to ask about the similarities between the monsters in this world and the monsters in Earth's legends. The goddess said it was because she had introduced them. Kim then asked if there were any issues with him dealing with the heroes, and received a negative answer from the goddess. He was brought here as a reward for his contributions in the war against the Demon King, so even if he killed both the saintess and the warriors, it would not anger the goddess because she does not attach personal emotions to the system, just like the principle of not favoring skills like the path to salvation. It simply says, "Well done," if that action is deemed necessary. This also made him confused. The goddess explained that the heroes appeared originally to increase competition and drive the development of both the human and demon races, but the results led nowhere. Therefore, thanks to this, the hero system has been eliminated and will no longer appear in the future. which means from now on, both sides can unilaterally destroy the other faction. As for competition, humanity in the future will not consist of a single race. There will be humans, elves, dwarves, beastkin, and lizardmen. Currently, they are all allies, but once the demon race disappears, they will begin to compete against each other. After hearing this, Kim didn't ask further, but went straight to the point, the wish granted to the hero who defeated the Demon King. He coldly asked the goddess if she could send him back to Earth. That question immediately made the goddess freeze, and Kim's expression also stiffened. "Can you let me return to Earth?" Facing this question, the goddess remained silent and did not answer. After a few seconds of quiet, she hesitated before daring to reply, "I cannot do this. You are an individual with immense influence in this world already, so I am not permitted to let you go to another world." Hearing that, he felt completely stunned. He never imagined that his influence had grown to such an extent, that even the goddess couldn't send him back to Earth. Kim seemed to realize something, or rather, "So the goddess system cannot directly send me back?" The goddess nodded to confirm. He probed her to see if he could find a way back on his own. At this moment, the goddess revealed that Hispanic is currently receiving information and would need a lot of time to process it. Hearing that, he immediately said, "Then cancel it." A mysterious smile suddenly appeared on his lips, and he thought to himself, "Knowing that is enough. I cannot go back on my word. The matter of finding a way back to Earth is considered complete. My next objective is dominating all things." Even though he had devoured a dragon, that still wasn't enough. No matter how strong he becomes, he could still be targeted by higher-level beings and humanity. As for those monsters that haven't reached dragon level, then he could devour as many as he wanted. He wanted to hold the power of a species even more superior than that. He asked the goddess if there was any species that, despite having a normal physical structure, could still trample all physical laws. Yes. With that answer, a flood of information about the strongest creatures was transmitted directly into his mind. Kim suddenly shuddered as he felt the information. Within his mind, it was also transmitted to the goddess. Her voice echoed slowly, "This is a type of creature inspired by the Cthulhu region on Earth. The current technology on this continent still cannot control it. It's a shame." The goddess asked him that if he had the privilege of the one who destroyed the Demon King and could also create such a creature, what would he do? That question was truly too difficult for Kim. Because he understood its importance very well, he couldn't choose randomly. Those creatures possess countless unique skills, such as moving at 400 times the speed of light, teleportation, or the ability to create new bodies. But in the end, he could only create one, so he was extremely hesitant and weighed every little detail. After thinking for a while, he spoke up and said, "Let's postpone it." Hearing that, the goddess immediately asked, "Kim, are you dissatisfied with something?" He answered immediately, No, that's not it." In his mind, those superior creatures that he couldn't even deal with yet shouldn't be allowed to appear. Because if he climbed to the peak of dominance too quickly, he would be easily distracted. By then, there would be all sorts of creatures wanting to take his life. The one at the top must be the strongest, undefeated in the world. There are still too many creatures in this world that he hasn't devoured. It wouldn't be too late to slowly devour them all and then finally accept that superior power, after thinking it through thoroughly. Kim said to the goddess, "My wish is, will I still get my reward for defeating the Demon Lord?" Hearing that, the goddess immediately agreed to pause the reward process. He asked her when he could come back, and she replied that he could return whenever he wanted. However, his companions were still in the middle of making their wishes, so it would take quite some time. The goddess asked if he wanted to go on ahead or wait for them, and Kim quickly chose to go first. With that, the goddess considered her mission complete. Before he left, she didn't forget to offer him her best wishes.